Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. One day, deep within the ancient lands, the MC stumbled upon the spirit of a legendary spell blade. Long ago, he stood alone against endless monster hordes, saving thousands of innocent lives at the cost of his own. But instead of the glory he deserved, he was betrayed. His own commander used the entire squad as bait, sending every last one of them to die, while stealing all the credit for himself. In the end, the greatest hero's name was erased from history. After learning the truth, the MC offered him a deal. He promised to help him finally get his revenge, but in return, the legendary warrior had to become his undead servant. After that, Ryoga forged him a brand new body, far stronger than the one he had before. The legendary Spellblade was reborn once again, gaining the power to keep getting stronger with every battle. So why would Ryoga go this far? Because not long ago, he was one of the most feared hunters of his era. On top of that, he became the supreme Necromancer, standing at the absolute peak of power. That's exactly why the gods marked him for death. To make sure he was gone for good, 7 of the world's strongest hunters wiped an entire city, and everyone living inside it off the map. But even in his final moments, Ryoga managed to activate the Chronos clock. Time itself rewound, sending him all the way back to the past. His heart pounds while he checks himself, trying to understand whether the reversal truly worked. As recognition sets in, he steadies his breathing and looks around with growing certainty. He realizes he has returned to the home where he once lived, confirming that he has truly gone back to the past. Ryoga tests the broken pocket watch and anxiously wonders whether his desperate attempt to change fate succeeded. When he realizes he is back before his murder, his relief hardens into rage and he swears Dimitri will pay for killing him so pointlessly. The watch reveals itself as a holy relic tied to time, confirming it forced a miracle but can no longer rewind time again from this point. Its shattered state makes clear that his one chance to turn back the clock has already been spent. Ryoga understands his gamble worked anyway, because activating the relic before death let him return to an earlier moment. A system window appears and recognizes him as a player, offering him a fresh class selection based on his innate traits. His status is laid out, and the key advantage is his innate trait Clear Mind, which grants resistance to mental attacks. The system limits his initial choices to martial artist, mage, or priest. Remembering how carelessly he chose in his previous life, Ryoga decides not to rush this time. He resolves to build enough strength to survive to the end instead of dying meaninglessly again. With that goal in mind, he heads out intending to secure the foundation needed to become a top-ranked hunter. His search brings him to the Natsuhabra Hunter Market. Inside, a clerk welcomes him as he begins looking for something specific. Ignoring the ordinary magical goods she offers, Ryoga asks directly for the Ring of Dark Gloom. The request catches the clerk off guard, signaling he is after something unusual and dangerous. She warns him the ring is cursed, but Ryoga cuts past the warning and asks only for the price. After making the purchase, he leaves with the ring in hand despite the obvious risk. The clerk stresses that the store offers no guarantees for cursed items and gives him one last chance to back out. Ryoga accepts that reaction as normal, because almost no one would willingly buy a ring that inflicts severe mental corruption. The item description confirms the curse. Wearing it subjects the user to mental affliction from the abyss. Ryoga puts it on anyway, confident that this hidden item holds a secret others never discovered. As the curse surges into him, the ring begins a trial that promises the knowledge and power of a necromancer to anyone who can endure it. Ryoga welcomes the assault, knowing this is the path to the class he truly wants. His mind is dragged into a dark trial space where the ring's curse takes form. Facing the test head-on, he prepares to identify the curse meant to break him. The answer appears as the golden image of Kronos, and Ryoga immediately recognizes Dimitri behind that power. The apparition condemns him as a decaying creature and treats him as something beneath contempt. It mocks Ryoga's ambition, insisting that without a constellation's blessing he can never harm a necromancer favored by the stars. The trial escalates as that overwhelming authority reaches toward him like an unavoidable judgment. Kronos declares that even returning to the past changes nothing if Ryoga still lacks the power to oppose him. A divine strike descends, meant to crush Ryoga under the same hopeless gap in power that killed him before. But the system immediately blocks the attack as mental interference rather than reality. Clear Mind activates and grants total immunity, shattering the curse's attempt to dominate his thoughts. With the illusion broken, Ryoga clears the Ring of Dark Gloom's trial. The ring's dormant necromancer power awakens, and Ryoga realizes the trial was impossible for others because fear of becoming a necromancer made them reject it. He accepts that if no constellation will ever choose a necromancer, then he must seize that path without their approval. Ryoga decides he will create a constellation that chooses him instead, turning rejection into a new ambition. The system acknowledges his victory, awakens the necromancer's power within the ring, and upgrades the item from rare to epic. Satisfied, Ryoga grips the empowered ring and prepares for the next step. When the class menu reopens, a fourth option has appeared, and he immediately selects Necromancer. The class grants him the Guide of Death trait, and converts his mana into spirit power, formally changing his build. Purple deathly energy gathers around him as the new class settles into place. Guide of Death further improves his future summons by reducing the spirit cost to cast and maintain them. Ryoga judges this outcome as the right beginning for the life he intends to rebuild. He checks his new abilities and notices he only has 2 usable skills at the moment. The first is Raise Undead, a basic necromancy spell for animating the dead. The second is Bone Control, and Ryoga realizes that after regressing his rank and skill progression have reset as well. He concludes that although he kept the Necromancer knowledge hidden in the ring, the system still forces him to grow again from the bottom through its star rank structure. That means he may climb back to 7-star strength, but normal progression still cannot reach the transcendent 9-star realm he seeks. Even after becoming a necromancer earlier than before, Ryoga understands this alone is still far from enough to change his ultimate fate. A warning reaches Dimitri that defeating the Guardian Star is necessary. He travels to the Temple of Cronus, crossing the sea toward the place tied to that challenge. At the temple, the site is treated as sacred ground connected to Cronus. The legend there speaks of Cronus as a once great ruler brought low after losing his Guardian Star and being cast out. Inside the ruined sanctuary, Dimitri stands before an altar and searches for the key to reaching him. He realizes the broken pocket watch he carries is unlike the others and must be the trigger. Betting that it can open contact with Cronus, he raises it and commits to the attempt. He smashes the watch against the altar to force its power to respond. The shattered watch ignites with golden energy in his hand instead of breaking uselessly. That power tears open the space around him and drags him into a divine realm. Dimitri arrives in a vast temple-like domain lit by stained glass and ancient power. A voice challenges the intruder, and Dimitri turns to face whoever rules this place. Cronus manifests before him in overwhelming form and demands to know who dared disturb him. Rather than panic, Dimitri meets the pressure with calm confidence. He introduces himself and makes clear that he came specifically to find the fallen titan Cronus. Cronus studies him, suspicious but willing to hear more. Dimitri keeps hold of the altered watch, showing he came prepared for this encounter. Cronus quickly identifies him as the human who reversed time. Dimitri confirms it openly, making no attempt to hide what he has done. Cronus notes that such a feat should have required immense power, and asks why Dimitri awakened him. He explains that after losing his guardian star and being overthrown by Olympus, he was sealed away, and only someone who had tampered with time could have reached him now. Dimitri cuts to the point by asking whether Cronus still wants revenge. The question catches Cronus off guard because it strikes directly at what he still desires. Dimitri offers a bargain. If Cronus becomes his guardian star, he will help him take revenge. Cronus is intrigued that a mere human would dare propose partnership instead of submission. Dimitri tightens his grip on the watch, holding his nerve as the pressure rises. He strengthens the offer by saying he can help Cronus reclaim his lost authority, and that Zeus is one of Dimitri's own targets. He argues that their enemies overlap, making alliance more useful than hostility. Cronus admits the idea has merit, since the constellations of Olympus were the ones who stripped him of everything. Still, he warns that Dimitri may be able to activate the watch, but that does not mean he understands the power he is invoking. Dimitri answers that his own necromancer nature also stands outside providence, so he is not as incompatible with Cronus as a normal human would be. Cronus explains that his authority is over harvest and time, the force that governs growth, decline, and the turning of eras. He adds that harvest is bound to death and rebirth, making his power akin to a grim reaper that opposes the fixed order of providence. Offended by Dimitri's confidence, Cronus warns him not to compare himself lightly to a god of that scale. The temple trembles under Cronus's anger, showing how dangerous it would be to push him further. Dimitri refuses to back down and insists this is exactly the moment to speak plainly. He presses Cronus with the humiliation of living on powerless and forgotten after losing both his name and his strength. Dimitri declares that if Cronus accepts that fate, so be it. But he came because he believes even a god's nature can be changed. He makes his true proposal clear: regain your power through me, and together we can overthrow Olympus. Privately, Dimitri knows he cannot retreat from this gamble because failure would leave him with no path forward. Cronus begins to smile, recognizing both the desperation and the audacity in front of him. He admits he has never abandoned revenge and reveals that there is indeed a way to use Dimitri for it. The idea that a god of harvest could be remade into something that defies providence appeals to him. Cronus warns that altering his nature will bring unbearable pain to Dimitri. He sets the condition: if Dimitri can endure that suffering, Cronus will become his guardian star. The divine realm erupts with golden power as Cronus begins the transformation. Dimitri is caught off guard by how suddenly Cronus acts, but he has no chance to stop it. Cronus formally appoints him as his proxy and, beyond that, as his saint. Dimitri is stunned by the unexpected title and what it implies. Golden power engulfs him as the bond is forged, and he is remade into a saint who receives divine authority directly from the constellation. He realizes the darkness of a necromancer and the holiness of a saint are colliding inside his body. Fighting to stay conscious, he knows that if he blacks out now, his chance to secure a guardian star may be lost forever. A towering divine presence bears down on him as he struggles under the strain. He forces himself to endure the pain rather than let the opportunity slip away. Later, he arrives in Japan, dragging his luggage into the terminal. He moves forward calmly, having made it to his destination. Pleased, he decides Japan suits him just as he expected. His floating companion, Ho marvels at how much the world has changed. Ho laments the cruelty of time while the man takes in the airport around them. The man dryly reminds Ho that despite acting lofty, he is still only his contractor. He also points out that Ho talks a lot for someone unable to grant even a basic blessing. As he reviews his situation, he notes that every guardian has become tied to a constellation, yet Ho has no worshippers and should have no power at all. That contradiction makes Ho an anomaly among divine beings, a guardian who should not still exist. Ho admits he has been asleep for ages and is simply overwhelmed to be awake again. He then declares that because he has chosen this man as his saint, the man must now address him with proper reverence. The man ignores the demand and focuses on the real issue. He has somehow become both priest and saint, with top-tier classes feeding power into him. His status confirms the fusion, granting him the trait Saint of the White Knight and letting priest abilities work without weakening his necromancer skills. He studies a new spell, Life Drain, and learns it is a holy technique corrupted by death that steals life to heal or strengthen him. The impossible truth becomes clear. He can wield a saint's holy power and a necromancer's spirit power at the same time. He immediately recognizes how absurdly overpowered that combination is. Ho boasts that making him a saint was an effortless masterstroke and takes credit like a triumphant god king. Instead of indulging the bragging, the man quietly thinks through his next move. He decides an old fixed gate nearby would be the best place to test his new abilities. The target he chooses is the Ancient Garden, a dimension suited for experimentation. Outside under the bright city sky, he heads toward the gate's site. He recalls that gates are dimensional links formed when unstable magic repeats in one place. This one is a permanent fixed gate, and its display identifies it as the Ancient Garden. Seeing the entry requirement is only 1 star, he confirms he can enter without trouble. A nearby party of hunters notices him and warns him to be careful around the gate. He hesitates only briefly, weighing whether to engage with them. The group kindly offers to let him join them if he is entering alone. He declines without explanation and keeps his attention on the gate. The hunters accept the refusal, though not without curiosity. As he walks off, they assume he is an inexperienced newcomer and worry he may be in over his head. One of them dismisses the concern, arguing that he made his own choice. At the threshold, he decides this low-level place is perfect for trying out his new skill. He enters the Ancient Garden. Inside, the peaceful silence immediately strikes him. Rather than relax, he assumes that such quiet means an ambush is coming. He coolly predicts his first target is about to reveal itself. Right on cue, something drops toward him from above. He identifies the attacker as a goblin before it can even land a hit. The goblin's charge passes him harmlessly as he remains composed. A second goblin lunges in, trying to overwhelm him at close range. He seizes the opening, mocking the creature's bad luck as he activates White Knight and converts his power. He calls up Life Drain, the holy spell that steals vitality for his own use. The spell takes hold, and the goblin's life force begins to tear away from it. As he channels the technique, he notes that holy power feels surprisingly similar to spirit power in practice. The goblin convulses as its life is forcibly drained from its body. Then his attention snaps upward, sensing a new threat before the fight is truly over. After absorbing a goblin's life force, he realizes his basic stats have increased. Seeing small gains to strength and agility, he concludes that killing with Life Drain can make him stronger directly. Since leveling only grants a small bonus, he starts comparing that reward to the value of draining enemies instead. When he levels up from the goblin kills, it confirms that hunting goblins can raise him in 2 ways at once. As he processes the discovery, his spirit companion appears beside him. The companion proudly asks for praise, and he admits the result is genuinely impressive. The spirit basks in the credit while he accepts that it deserves recognition this time. He turns his attention to the goblin corpse at his feet and decides to test his necromancy on it. Dark power gathers around his hand as he prepares to use a new spell. He directs that power into the corpse to force a response. With a command to answer him, he casts Raise Undead. Necromantic energy spreads through the dead goblin's body. The corpse begins to swell with unnatural movement as the spell takes hold. The goblin pushes itself up from the ground, no longer truly dead. He watches with satisfaction as his first undead servant rises before him. The system confirms the resurrection was highly successful and that the zombie stats have been greatly amplified. He identifies the creature as an undead goblin zombie of low grade. Pleased, he judges that this servant should be useful in the Ancient Garden. He faces the zombie as if measuring how much weight it can carry in the coming fights. Before he can go further, several living goblins emerge from the forest and rush in aggressively. He and his new undead servant stand their ground as the goblins close in. Rather than intervene himself, he decides this is the perfect chance to test the zombie in combat and orders it forward. The zombie charges at the attackers with far more speed and force than an ordinary goblin. It slams into the first goblin hard enough to tear through its face. The remaining goblins strike back together, trying to overwhelm it. Even heavy blows fail to stop the undead, which keeps advancing through the damage. He notes calmly that a zombie does not die from ordinary vital strikes, so the goblin's panic is pointless. He joins the fight directly, seizing one goblin by the neck with sudden force. As he crushes it, a trait called White Knight activates and grants him another small increase in strength and agility. His intervention knocks one goblin down while the melee around the zombie continues. Another goblin hesitates in fear as the undead turns on it at close range. The zombie tears into that goblin as well, killing it brutally. Watching a corpse fall, he wonders whether Life Drain can still extract anything from something already dead. When it works, he realizes Life Drain has a tolerance range and can still harvest from a fresh corpse. With that confirmed, he decides to prioritize speed in how he kills and harvests enemies. He recalls the Necromancer maxim that once the first corpse is secured, victory is already halfway achieved. Now he understands the practical meaning of that rule as his undead force begins to build. He casts Raise Undead again, using the fresh goblin corpses to expand his army. The new zombies rise with high completion rates and major stat boosts, turning the battlefield in his favor. Seeing the process succeed repeatedly, he realizes he has found the core of his fighting style. He concludes that necromancers become truly dangerous once their numbers start snowballing. His undead swarm the remaining goblins, dragging them into a chaotic slaughter. The zombies tear through living goblins with relentless, lethal force. Even when a goblin lands a desperate counterattack, the undead keeps pressing forward through the wound. That resilience breaks the enemy's nerve as the goblin realizes normal resistance is useless. The zombie finishes it at point-blank range, ending the fight decisively. His spirit companion praises him and says it wants to see even more of this kind of battle. He accepts the lesson completely and declares that this is how a necromancer is meant to fight. Standing over a field of bodies, he reaches the maximum number of undead he can currently control, 20. With his army assembled and necromantic power still gathering at his fingertips, he prepares for the next stage. A pack of goblin corpses under necromantic control closes in through the forest. The undead goblins surge forward as a hunting party comes under sudden pressure. The living goblins ahead are driven back by the charge, buying the hunters a moment. A female archer answers by unleashing a fire arrow to stop the rush. Her shot tears through one of the attackers and proves the summons can be damaged. Before the fight escalates, the undead halt as someone hidden nearby orders a pause. A black-haired young man calmly calls the concealed hunters out of hiding. The hidden party finally steps into the clearing. 3 wary hunters confront him and demand to know who he is. The floating old spirit beside him notices his reaction to them. He realizes he recognizes the trio as the twin shadow hunters. He confirms they are the same people who once tried to assassinate him before his regression. He recalls them as the sibling pair Yuma and Yuka Rendo, famous rookie twin hunters, accompanied by a third teammate. Even so, he judges that in their current state they are far weaker than he remembers. He notes they are only 1-star hunters now, and that this timeline includes a third member he did not face before. Though his spirit suggests eliminating future enemies now, he decides against it because they had only accepted a contract, not acted from personal hatred. The armored hunter shifts the conversation and asks whether the strange zombie is under the young man's control. He realizes necromancers are still obscure enough that his class is not widely recognized. So he openly admits the undead goblins are his summons. The admission makes the hunters reassess him with fresh alarm. He downplays the morality of it, treating the summons as practical labor and reminding himself that hunters usually fight for money anyway. Then he abruptly offers the trio a business arrangement. He proposes that they handle mana stone collection while he kills the monsters, offering them an easy share of the profits. The 3 hesitate, unsure whether to trust someone this strange. For a beat, the forest falls quiet while they weigh the offer. The woman and the blonde teammate warn their leader that a man who commands zombies is too dangerous to trust. Meanwhile, the young man waits with casual patience, as if the answer hardly matters. Privately, he grows impatient with how long their discussion is taking. At last the leader accepts the partnership. He immediately tries to renegotiate for an even split, arguing that anything less leaves his team with too little. The necromancer cuts him down to a final offer of 7-3 and makes clear he is willing to walk away. The blonde hunter worries they are making a mistake, but the leader tells him not to panic. He insists the stranger could have killed them already if he wanted to, and reads his confidence as proof of overwhelming strength. Convinced they can profit more by following him than by refusing, the leader commits to the deal. Soon after, the party's pace becomes too much for the rookies to maintain. The blonde hunter collapses first, exhausted and begging for a rest. The archer admits she has hit her limit as well. The leader keeps collecting mana stones into a growing pile while his teammates recover. Watching this, he becomes even more certain the necromancer is far beyond ordinary. The battlefield itself proves it, with the young man standing amid heaps of goblin corpses while his summons keep fighting. He casually points out that the dead monsters are basically money waiting to be picked up. The leader awkwardly asks if they can take a break soon. Instead, one undead goblin tears into a living goblin and keeps the slaughter going. The necromancer calmly directs their attention to yet another kill. He politely tells them not to feel rushed, which only makes his indifference more unsettling. The 3 rookies are left thinking they are dealing with something inhuman. By the time the area is mostly cleared, goblin bodies carpet the ground. With the fight under control, he decides to check how much stronger he has become. His status shows sharp gains across every attribute, especially agility and strength. He is thrilled that only a few hours of diving raised his stats enough to rival a level 4 hunter, confirming how efficient life drain is. He also realizes his overall level has increased. Satisfied, he turns his attention toward the dungeon boss. Deeper in the dungeon, goblins guard a throne where their shaman leader waits. The shaman senses the intruder and mocks the arrival of a foolish human. The necromancer answers by ridiculing the shaman's pretensions. One of the hunters warns that the goblin shaman is the southern area's boss and should not be provoked lightly. The insult enrages the shaman, who orders his followers to drag the human before him. A mass of red-eyed goblins charges at the command. The shaman goes further and orders them to devour the intruder completely. The necromancer's undead meet the assault head-on and start ripping through the front line. Buffed goblins strike back hard, cutting into his summons. The melee turns vicious as both sides tear each other apart. His summon count begins to drop, showing that the goblins are finally inflicting real losses. Rather than panic, he calls for another corpse to rise and replace the fallen. A dead goblin hand twitches in answer to his command. A fresh undead goblin stands up, restoring his summon count to full. The new summon immediately joins the fight without hesitation. It carves into a living goblin and helps swing the numbers back. The watching hunters finally understand that he is replenishing his army by turning enemy corpses into new summons. Behind the battle, the shaman reaches for a hidden weapon and prepares a stronger move. He raises a skull-top staff and begins a ritual incantation. A totem of valor erupts from the ground and starts empowering the goblins. The goblins' eyes blaze brighter as the buff takes hold. The shaman boasts that his totem weakens enemies while strengthening allies. Before he can finish gloating, one of the undead seizes the totem itself. The shaman turns in disbelief at the interruption. He explodes in outrage that a human dared lay hands on his sacred totem. More skull totems rise around the battlefield as the ritual escalates. But the necromancer's summons smash into them before they can secure the effect. His undead refuse to let the goblins protect their source of power. The shaman tightens his grip, trying to force the ritual through. The necromancer taunts him for losing control. The skull staff itself begins to react strangely under outside interference. The shaman invokes a madness spell, unleashing a dangerous incantation across the field. The blast leaves the three rookie hunters reeling even from a distance. The system confirms the goblin's strength and agility have surged by half. Empowered goblins tear through more of his summons, and his numbers start falling fast. The losses accelerate as the buffed horde overwhelms several undead at once. Within moments, half his army is gone. The battlefield is littered with broken summons, as his count drops even further. He quickly identifies the staff as the true source of the shaman's advantage. The shaman proudly reveals that the bone staff was forged from the grudges of goblins. That explanation gives the necromancer an immediate idea. He realizes a bone-based cursed item is exactly the kind of thing he can exploit. He activates bone control and reaches for the staff itself. The shaman feels the weapon resisting his command and is thrown into confusion. The staff rips free of the goblin's grasp. It flies straight into the necromancer's hand, and the madness incantation is forcibly interrupted. The shaman can only stare and demand an explanation. The backlash snaps the goblins out of their frenzy and strips away the buff that had empowered them. Holding the stolen staff, the necromancer invites the shaman to try that spell again if he can. The system identifies his new prize as bone control, a necromancer-compatible skill that manipulates bones with mana. He is impressed by how responsive the cursed bones are, likely because the grudges inside them make them easier to command. Then he mockingly sends the stolen staff back toward its former owner. Instead of returning harmlessly, the staff rockets forward like a spear. The shaman realizes too late that the weapon is no longer his to control. The flying staff punches through his back. It bursts out through his chest, pinning him with his own weapon. As he collapses, the necromancer activates life drain on the boss. The kill rewards him with another jump in agility, strength, and magic, and he notes that bosses provide especially rich returns. Only after the fight ends does he remember the others are still watching. The three rookies can only stare at what he just did. He kneels beside the corpse and starts collecting the boss's blood for future use. He reminds himself he nearly ran out of blood while fueling life drain. Once finished, he tells the rookies the remaining cleanup is theirs. They look over the mountain of goblin corpses and realize the cleanup alone will be a nightmare. Back in the city, the party emerges from the gate into daylight. The return to the real world feels almost abrupt after the carnage inside. The necromancer walks out first, composed and satisfied. Behind him, the three rookies stagger out under the weight of their haul and their shock. Onlookers are stunned that only 4 hunters returned with that many mana stones, and rumors immediately begin to spread. Ignoring the attention, he suggests they take the stones to a shop in Natsuhabara. The leader advises against using a middleman if they want a fair price and offers to handle the sale directly. The necromancer jokes about whether he is really supposed to trust people he only met today. The team nervously reminds him they did work hard too, and he lets the tension go by saying he was only kidding. When he asks the value of the haul, the leader estimates roughly 6 million. The necromancer then points out the boss's staff among the loot. He claims the staff is probably worth almost nothing and asks why. The answer is that the staff of grudges is rare but restricted to priests, and while it boosts spiritual power, it also erodes the user's mind and can trigger confusion. Since priests are poor users of spiritual power to begin with, he concludes the item is practically unwanted by everyone else. Hearing that, he asks to take the staff for himself. He even offers to have its value deducted from his share. The leader refuses to charge him, insisting they only obtained the item because of him, and will treat it as if it never dropped. After checking with his teammates, the whole group agrees. Their fairness leaves him genuinely pleased with how this team operates. He confirms their team name is the Rookies and proposes they dive together again the next day, which they eagerly accept. The next day, he returns to the ancient garden for another run. His undead goblins immediately resume cutting down enemies as he advances. He scans the area and judges the team's condition. The Rookies are already exhausted and ask whether they can keep going. The leader admits they have reached their limit for the day. Their bags are also packed full with mana stones, so he tells them to head back first while he stays behind. Once they leave, he remains alone with his spirit companion and a full undead escort. The old spirit immediately sees through him and asks why he deliberately sent the others away. He admits the truth. From this point on, he does not want any witnesses. He moves deeper into the ancient garden, toward the north side. The quiet stream and empty woods suggest a different kind of threat ahead. Then movement in the brush reveals multiple glowing eyes lying in wait. A pack of red-eyed frog monsters burst out to ambush him, and he faces them without flinching. A pack of undead wolf-like beasts surges through the forest under a necromantic glow, closing in on their prey. One of the monsters tears into a goblin-like enemy's throat, turning the clash into a brutal rout. A frogman warrior realizes too late that another summoned beast is already on top of him. The second summon drives a weapon through the frogman's chest and drops him on the spot. As more frogmen are skewered in quick succession, the protagonist notes that their superior stats over goblins made this outcome inevitable. His undead continue carving through the remaining frogmen, overwhelming them from all sides. Standing calmly behind the slaughter, he treats the fight as a simple matter of enemy quality rather than danger. He takes direct control of his staff and launches it forward like a guided spear. The flying staff punches into a frogman's torso, but the target remains standing. A system notice reveals the frogman's oil shower trait reduces damage from piercing attacks, explaining why the strike failed to finish it. He immediately recognizes the problem and adjusts his approach instead of forcing the same tactic. A second fighter rushes in and lands a heavy kick, creating an opening against the frogman. With spiritual power reinforcing the staff of grudges, the blow now hits with far greater force and caves the enemy in. Seeing the revised attack work, he commits to the stronger method without hesitation. Using potion control, he remotely whips the staff through multiple frogmen in a rapid chain of crushing strikes. He explains that he is manipulating the staff while feeding it spiritual power, accepting the steady drain on his reserves to keep the assault going. Even while his power continues to drop, he activates Raise Undead on a fallen frogman to expand his army mid-battle. Though the cost is mounting, he decides he can still handle the fight and presses on. The dead frogmen rise under his command, swelling his forces with glowing-eyed new servants. One of the newly raised frogmen snaps awake and lunges back into the fray. The revived troops crash into the survivors, finishing the battle through sheer numbers and momentum. As the last resistance is erased, the system rewards him with a level up to level 6. He takes the gain as proof that he is steadily recovering his former strength. Remembering the hooded figure who once warned him away, he resolves to push deeper and uncover more than anyone expects. The fighting gives way to a hidden ruin at the heart of the ancient garden, where a solitary stone altar waits in a sunlit courtyard. He enters the ruin with his undead escort and approaches the site as if he already suspects it hides something valuable. From a frogman corpse, he carefully retrieves its heart and keeps it intact. When his fairy-like companion asks what he is planning, he makes clear that the organ is the key to his next move. He explains that frogman blood dropped onto the frogman's heart should trigger a reaction, then begins the ritual. The heart immediately responds, pulsing with green energy as the blood takes effect. Holding the activated heart, he watches the reaction stabilize while his companion hovers nearby. He realizes the ritual grants access to a hidden area that no one has discovered for years. The system confirms he has uncovered the ancient garden's secret and transfers him to the ancient proving grounds. He arrives inside a vast arena, his undead clustered around him as the new trial space reveals itself. He steps forward onto the cracked stone floor, testing the reality of the place. Surrounded by his summons, he recognizes that he has finally found the kind of hidden opportunity he had been searching for. Before he can settle in, a barrier of light rises nearby and signals the start of the trial. Something massive begins to materialize inside the glowing boundary. He tenses as he understands that the proving grounds are about to force a real test on him. The system announces a harsh restriction. Only one player may take part in this trial. It follows with the challenge itself, demanding proof of his courage and potential within the arena. Rather than panic, he senses the true opponent's arrival and greets it with anticipation. A Dragonian appears before him, and the system declares that surviving 10 minutes will count as success. The proving grounds are identified as the first ancient proving grounds, a place built around elite trials and monstrous opponents. He learns this arena was created by constellations of the Pantheon to sift out exceptional hunters. The Dragonian is described as a creature designed for that purpose, and survival alone is framed as the reward. His companion bluntly warns that at his current strength he has no chance of winning head-on. Accepting that, he decides his only realistic path is to endure the 10 minutes somehow. He reminds himself that the Dragonian has been scaled down to match a Star 1 trial, but he knows that does not make it easy. The Dragonian answers by slamming a clawed foot into the arena floor, beginning the confrontation. As the dragon-like undead turns to leave, the Necromancer stops it before it can charge off on instinct. He asks for a moment, deciding to alter the lesser plague zombies first while the dragon hesitates in confusion. Recalling how emergency transformations work in stories, he begins an improvised modification with confidence. The nearby frog-like plague zombies are seized by the spell and become the focus of his plan. The system confirms the undead conversion succeeded and that the target has been turned into a plague zombie under the right conditions. His floating companion is impressed that he can rewrite undead on the spot, and he dryly reminds her he used to be a necromancer. With the setup complete, he ends the discussion and prepares to test the result against the dragon. The dragon recognizes the threat and tenses to attack. It launches itself forward in a violent rush, trying to crush him before he can act again. In response, the modified plague zombies hurl themselves into its path as expendable weapons. They rain down around the dragon, forcing it to deal with multiple attackers at once. The dragon tears into them, but their bodies are already being used as delivery systems for the trap. One zombie clamps onto the dragon and injects the altered effect directly into its flesh. As more cling to it, the dragon realizes too late that it is being overwhelmed by contaminated bodies rather than raw force. A heavy blow bursts one of the zombies apart, but the poison has already been planted. The system identifies the inflicted status as acid poison LV-12, confirming the conversion worked. He explains that he redirected the plague zombie's transformation power into poison, reasoning that even if the dragon stays physically strong, the toxin should still kill it. The dragon answers by detonating its strength outward and blasting the remaining attackers away. It digs into the ground to steady itself and force its body through the pain. Roaring in fury, it refuses to collapse and keeps advancing despite the poison. The Necromancer acknowledges its toughness, surprised that it can endure a hit that severe. He immediately switches tactics, channeling spiritual power into the Staff of Guides to reinforce it for direct combat. Armed with the empowered staff, he rushes the dragon inside a burst of necromantic energy. Even while resisting the poison, the dragon remains dangerous enough that he cannot afford a mistake. He strikes first with a wave of force, trying to keep the dragon off balance. The dragon powers through and lunges anyway, choosing aggression over survival. Seeing the opening, he invokes bone control to attack the dragon from within. The spell drives through the dragon's body and tears into it internally. The dragon convulses as its own skeleton is forced against it, leaving it badly wounded. He orders the plague zombies in again, using them to capitalize on the dragon's stagger. They latch onto the dragon's neck and shoulders, reopening the damage and spreading more corruption. Though bleeding and poisoned, the dragon still shows enough will to resist and remain standing. From behind, its body is visibly failing under the combined strain of poison, internal damage, and clinging undead. The dragon lashes out and smashes another zombie apart in a desperate attempt to clear itself. It destroys more of them, but each effort only confirms that its last reserves are being spent on survival. Watching calmly, the Necromancer judges this as the dragon's final struggle and declares the fight effectively over. At last the dragon drops to its knees, no longer able to keep fighting. He plants the skull-topped staff into the ground, ending the assault and asserting control over the battlefield. With the staff raised, he stands over the defeated dragon without any sign of panic. He walks past the kneeling creature, treating its defeat as settled fact. A small motion of his hand signals one final spell. He activates Life Drain, holy power still burning through the dragon as the finishing technique takes hold. The system announces that he has cleared Ancient Proving Ground's eye, confirming the dragon's death. His companion marvels that he really defeated a dragon with little more than plague undead, and he reminds her he never intended to die here. A new reward appears, the Crest of Endurance, a passive enhancement that reduces damage, improves mana recovery, softens stun and status effects, and strengthens concentration. He accepts the reward with satisfaction, calling it a worthwhile gain, but he decides the true prize is the dragon's corpse, which he recognizes as material for a high-grade undead. He begins another transformation immediately, determined to turn the dragon into a stronger undead form instead of letting such a body go to waste. Thinking it through, he concludes the corpse may be too damaged for his original plan but could still serve another purpose if his memory is right. The scene shifts away from the arena to Kishiai Prefecture, setting up the next stage of the story. A young man returns to an old laboratory building, recognizing it immediately despite the time that has passed. He notes with quiet confidence that even after his regression, the place is almost exactly as he remembers. Before he can enter properly, a violent blast erupts from inside, confirming the lab is still as hazardous as ever. Coughing through the smoke, he dryly concludes that some things truly never change. The explosion draws out the lab's owner, who peers through the doorway while both of them recover from the fumes. The visitor smiles, already certain he has found the person he came for. The startled researcher steps out, and the visitor identifies him as his target. The man is revealed to be the future legendary alchemist Race Final, famed for creating the world's first mass-produced mid-tier potion. Approaching calmly, the visitor asks for a moment of Ray's time, despite Ray's suspicion toward an intruder in his private lab. He introduces himself as Ryoga Chinen and says he came because he wants to use Ray's alchemical tools. Ray can only stare at him in disbelief, openly put off by the absurd request. Ryoga makes clear he is not asking for charity and intends this to be mutually beneficial. He proves his value at once by correctly identifying Rei's research as an attempt to mass-produce mid-tier health potions. Before Rei can process how he knew that, Ryoga casually offers to help him complete the formula. Inside the lab, the unfinished potion materials show how close yet unstable Rei's work still is. The room is packed with books and equipment, the kind of place built around obsessive trial and error. Rei is stunned when Ryoga effortlessly stabilizes a potion that had been on the verge of exploding. Ryoga hints that Rei would not understand how he did it yet, not after all the years of failed research still ahead of him. To prove his method further, Ryoga asks if Rei wants to test it directly. He cuts his own hand without hesitation, using himself as the experiment. With the wound open, he applies the potion immediately. The medicine reacts at once, foaming over the injury as its effect takes hold. A moment later, the wound is completely healed, leaving no doubt that the formula works. Rei's skepticism breaks into excitement as he realizes he is witnessing a genuine success. He can barely believe it, overwhelmed that the potion really did succeed. Driven by curiosity, Rei reaches for the sample, but Ryoga keeps it just out of reach. When Rei tries again, Ryoga still refuses to hand it over, making him chase the answer instead. Ryoga teases him with the formula, and Rei eagerly admits he wants to know everything about it. Seeing that eagerness, Ryoga moves to negotiation and asks to borrow Rei's workshop for a while. He offers terms. Rei can work under him, learn potion recipes and much more, and in return Ryoga will share knowledge and resources. He sweetens the proposal with a profit split of 60-40, expecting Rei to accept the smaller share. Rei outwardly stays cautious, but inwardly realizes he has already been lured in by the bait. As Rei reaches toward the potion, Ryoga silently recognizes that he is no longer dealing with an equal so much as a future subordinate. At the same time, a ring on Ryoga's hand activates with a strange glow. From that power, a draconic corpse or creature materializes, revealing another purpose behind Ryoga's visit. Rei notices the bizarre specimen and demands to know what Ryoga has brought into his lab. Ryoga explains that he is a necromancer and intends to process it into a special corpse. When Rei keeps prying, Ryoga bluntly tells him to stop peeking and help if he is that interested. Rei pushes back, pointing out that they have not even signed a contract yet. Ryoga brushes off the objection and treats the lab as if he already belongs there, leaving Rei fuming at his arrogance. A spirit companion comments that Ryoga's caution and controlling behavior come from what he has endured. The narration reveals that Ryoga once worked for a major guild under a restrictive contract that stole his freedom and denied him the rewards of his own discoveries. Because of that betrayal, he now sees the human world as driven by exploitation and obsession, little different from the gods. Ryoga reads Rei's hesitation correctly and says the real issue is that Rei still doubts his ability. Rei answers by challenging him to help with the work first and prove his worth through action. That direct challenge catches Ryoga's full attention. He accepts without argument, and the two finally move from bargaining to cooperation. Ryoga immediately gives precise instructions, starting with melting 5 F-rank mana stones at exactly 42%. He completes the step with startling speed, leaving Rei impressed by how effortlessly he works. As Ryoga smirks over the progress, Rei admits to himself that the man is far more capable than expected, even as he wonders what Ryoga truly plans to do with that corpse. Using liquid made from a Sintian as a catalyst, he begins a new alchemical process on a dragon corpse. He explains that he carved magic formulas into the bones and layered them with curses to strengthen an undead servant. To make it work, he repeatedly stacks those formulas and curses while his assistant keeps preparing materials beside him. The work turns into relentless repetition, with the assistant grinding ingredients while he continues refining the body. The assistant is pushed to exhaustion as the process drags on without pause. At last, the reconstruction is completed, and the black-haired man confirms the result. He is surprised it finished faster than expected, while the assistant can barely believe it only took 3 days. Watching him, the assistant starts to seriously wonder what kind of person he has agreed to work with. He reflects that this man is only a 1-star yet can restart a corpse's heart using pure mana alone. Even if his methods ignore common sense, the assistant admits his raw skill is undeniable. The black-haired man casually judges the assistant's usefulness and gives him a passing score. In return, the assistant agrees to accept the original proposal after all. He admits that a mid-grade healing potion would have taken him 2 years to complete alone, so this partnership changes everything. He decides that if the work advances his research, he is willing to commit himself to it. The black-haired man quietly takes satisfaction in securing the arrangement. He welcomes the assistant aboard as his new servant alchemist, and the assistant nervously accepts the title. With that settled, he turns his thoughts back to the next requirement, obtaining the core soul of an eldritch dragon. Before moving on, he answers a phone call. He confirms a payment transfer and arranges to discuss the details of another job in person. That leads him to the Boundary region, a dangerous forested area. A rookie adventuring party answers his summons and gathers around him. He orders them to follow, and they immediately fall in behind him. As they move through the monster-filled grasslands left behind by the fallen northern gate, one of them questions why he came to such a dangerous place. He only says he is here to pay respects to an old acquaintance, which leaves them confused. Soon he senses they have reached the right spot and begins searching the area. The party advances cautiously through the tall grass behind him. A hidden threat suddenly stirs nearby. An orc bursts from the grass and charges into view. The rookies panic at the sight of a dangerous 2-star orc and warn each other to stay back. He remains calm, deciding this is the right chance to test the weapon he made from processed ghoul bones. Activating bone control, he shapes the bone weapon with mana and sends it into motion. The orc locks onto him with murderous intent. It swings a massive sword in a direct attack. The blade crashes down toward him at full force. Seeing the attack, he realizes exactly what kind of opponent he is dealing with. He answers with confidence, already certain the outcome favors him. His bone blade intercepts the strike and cuts through the exchange. The counterattack punches into the orc's body and tears through flesh instead of ending it cleanly. He notes that he had aimed for the heart, but the orc proved tougher than expected. Still alive, the enraged orc tightens its grip and prepares to keep fighting. Blood pours from the wound as it forces itself onward. The orc lunges again in a reckless rush, refusing to go down. He stands his ground and lets it commit to the charge. An explosion suddenly erupts in the orc's path. He praises the timing as the party's shield bearer appears beside him behind a glowing barrier. With the opening secured, he decides one strike will not be enough and prepares a stronger follow-up. Using bone control again, he creates multiple bone projectiles at once. The orc charges straight into the trap as the sharpened bones close around it. The barrage impales the monster through the torso and finally destroys it. As the orc collapses, he and the shield bearer remain standing behind the defense, having ended the fight cleanly. The party is stunned to learn the quiet newcomer has already brought down a 2-star orc. He tells them not to lag behind because the real task is only beginning. When they question his confidence and whether he is even leading them correctly, he reveals he has a specific target in mind. He calmly confirms it while something large and undead stirs behind him. He unveils a zombie orc under his control and identifies it as an undead of the zombie race. His real objective is exposed. The orc he wants is inside the fortified orc settlement. He frames the raid as a profitable shortcut, since taking that orc would let them earn money in advance at the same time. His companions are left speechless by how casually he proposes exploiting the settlement. As evening falls, the hunt winds down. Another orc corpse is added to his growing stock of undead materials. The kill pushes his growth further, granting him another level and more absorbed stats. He also learns there is a cap on how much power he can absorb from a single race. Rather than being disappointed, he treats that limit as reasonable and keeps his focus. With daylight fading, he decides they have hunted enough for the day. The group settles into camp while he watches them prepare efficiently. He notes they are well organized, and they remind him this is already their 3rd day in the field. That night he shares the plan for tomorrow. His improved stats mean they will head for the orc settlement. The others accept the decision and commit to following through. As the camp breaks for sleep, he is assigned the night watch while the others turn in. Under the moonlight, his undead remain nearby as silent guards. The rest of the party sleeps soundly, trusting the camp to hold through the night. Instead of sleeping, he sits awake alone beneath the night sky. Remembering his recent level up, he decides to inspect the knowledge tied to his Necromancer class. He accesses the Library of Knowledge, where the previous Lord of Death's accumulated knowledge is stored. He reaches for one of the books, hoping to draw something useful from it. But the system blocks him, informing him that most of that knowledge is locked behind a much higher level requirement. Annoyed that a 9-star class guide is still restricted like this, he searches for anything he is actually allowed to read. He resigns himself to studying whatever limited material is available for now. So he sits down in the library and begins reading in earnest. He works through the text carefully, looking for any practical advantage. Something in the material finally catches, and he realizes he has found a usable breakthrough. By dawn, his study pays off with the acquisition of a new skill. Morning comes with his blonde companion waking abruptly from sleep. He is told to get up, only to realize something is wrong nearby. A heavily altered armored undead orc now looms over the camp, far more imposing than before. The sight sends the blonde adventurer scrambling back in alarm while the others remain more composed. The armored undead is clearly much larger and tougher looking than it was the previous day, confirming a major change overnight. Their leader admits he modified it himself. He presents the result as an armored zombie race, an upgraded undead with bone armor and overwhelming strength and endurance. He explains that the upgrade combines bone armor, which turns bone into wearable armor, with flesh writing, which manipulates a corpse's flesh. Satisfied with the enhancement, he announces that it is time to move on the orc settlement. At sunrise, the group sets out toward their target. They advance as a mixed force of adventurers and controlled undead, now far stronger than before. They soon arrive at the gates of the orc settlement. Their approach is immediately noticed, and the alarm is raised that enemies have arrived. Orc defenders rush out with spears to meet the threat. He responds at once by activating his new skill, Bone Control. The power lashes out in a violent surge toward the charging orcs. The attack tears through them in a brutal burst, crushing the first wave before it can close in. As the enemy line collapses, he dismisses their resistance as insignificant, and readies his blade to continue the assault. A band of goblin-like enemies closes in under a burning sky, led by a larger, scarred brute. The brute rallies the attack with a roar, raising his weapon and driving his side toward open battle. Archers immediately follow his lead and loose a volley meant to overwhelm the defenders at range. The arrows rain down in a sudden barrage, turning the opening clash into a lethal test. The human party weathers the volley as one fighter shields the others, buying their ranged attacker a chance to respond. A young woman calmly channels fire into her weapon, preparing a counterattack instead of retreating. She releases a fire arrow that arcs outward and then converges on the charging enemy line. The flaming strike tears through the front ranks, dropping at least one attacker and breaking their momentum. Watching from behind the fight, a composed young man notes that the spell is more useful than expected and sees room to exploit the battle further. He escalates the encounter by ordering the undead under his control to join the charge. Armored zombies surge forward on command, colliding with the goblins and turning the field into a melee. One undead fighter drives in with crushing force, showing that the summoned side can match the enemy physically. A blue blast detonates among the attackers, scattering them and widening the pressure on their formation. The young man credits his effectiveness to knowledge he studied the night before, confirming this is calculated use of newly learned skills. The goblins begin to panic as they realize the humans are controlling the pace of the fight. He sees that fear as only the start, already planning to push the advantage much further. Even so, the enemy refuses to break completely and throws another wave forward at the undead line. The battlefield devolves into close-quarters chaos as zombies and goblins trade blows at point-blank range. A goblin lands a heavy hit on an armored zombie, proving the undead front can still be worn down. The damage registers clearly as the zombie's armor loses durability under repeated impact. In response, the young man activates bone armor to reinforce his undead rather than let the line collapse. The battered zombie's armor restores itself, making the summon harder to bring down and stabilizing the defense. He follows with flesh writhing, creating a mass of living flesh to interfere directly with enemy movement. The writhing flesh lashes out and hooks into a goblin, beginning to pin the attackers in place. More goblins are snagged and slowed as the flesh clings to them, disrupting their advance and coordination. His ally realizes the tactic is not just damage, but battlefield control, using enemy flesh itself to stop their movement. From that, the ally concludes the young man's strength lies in unusually sophisticated skill usage rather than raw power alone. A subtle shift in the enemy line hints that something stronger is stepping in while the lesser goblins are stalled. The ordinary fighters part around a larger armored figure, revealing a more dangerous opponent entering the center of the field. The scarred leader emerges fully with glowing red eyes, signaling a far more threatening state than before. His body surges with violent energy as he transforms, shedding restraint and preparing a direct kill. The system identifies the change as Berserk mode and warns that this leader is now a high-danger special variant. Instead of panicking, the young man welcomes the escalation because he was tired of waiting for the real threat to appear. The Berserk leader answers with a massive, all-out swing meant to crush him in one blow. The attack crashes down, but the young man remains standing in place, refusing to yield the initiative. He counters by invoking bone control, shifting from reinforcement and traps to direct manipulation of the enemy's body. Power floods outward from him in multiple streams, reaching into the Berserk leader from several angles at once. Bones spear through the leader's torso and shoulder from within, turning the enemy's own body into a weapon against him. The force drives him into the ground, but the attack still fails to finish him outright. Even impaled and blasted apart from within, the Berserk leader remains standing through sheer monstrous resilience. The creature starts tearing the protruding bones free, trying to undo the control and recover. The young man stops him by maintaining the hold, though the effort begins draining his spirit power continuously. Another bone spike punches through the leader's chest, keeping him pinned and denying any chance to reset the fight. At close range, the young man taunts him for refusing to stay buried while the sustained drain continues to tax him. He realizes this standoff is dangerous because every second costs him power, and if the leader frees even one limb, the battle could turn. So he commits fully to bone control, preparing a decisive finishing sequence instead of a prolonged struggle. With his spirit power dropping fast, he drives multiple bones through the leader's vital points in one coordinated burst. The Berserk goblin is finally nailed in place and collapses backward, decisively neutralized. The victory comes at a price, as the young man staggers, sweating and bloodied from the strain of forcing the kill. Knowing his spirit reserves are no longer enough, he reaches for a harsher method and begins using life drain to keep going. The young hunter restores his spirit power in the aftermath of battle, gathering himself for what comes next. As the recovery takes hold, he steadies his breathing and regains confidence. He notices movement nearby and realizes someone is still trying to slip away. Inside the ruined village, panicked orcs attempt to flee the scene. He cuts off that hope immediately, making clear he has no intention of letting them escape. Activating wriggling flesh, he seizes control of their bodies from a distance. The fleeing orcs are violently forced down before they can get anywhere. Pinned and helpless, they are left exposed to his follow-up attack. A spectral weapon forms under his control, turning the execution into a clean finish. One of the last orcs dies with the summoned axe buried in its chest, ending the resistance. With the village cleared, his companions arrive and take in the field of corpses and dropped loot. Among the spoils, he spots a weapon valuable enough to stand out from the rest. The item reveals itself as a rare blood axe that grows stronger by drinking blood. He judges the raid a complete success, deciding the trouble of wiping out the orc village was worth it. Rather than manage the aftermath himself, he hands Yuma responsibility for collecting and sorting the loot. The others accept the assignment and tell him to go ahead while they finish the cleanup. Freed from the task, he walks off with a new purpose in mind. He stops before a twisted dead tree, having finally located the hidden presence he was searching for. He openly invites whatever is concealed there to reveal itself and talk. For a moment, the tree remains silent, testing whether he truly knows. He grows impatient, grips a bone weapon, and prepares to force the issue. A second man emerges through illusion and flame, ready to escalate if necessary. He strikes first, aiming to break the concealment rather than the figure itself. His blow tears through the disguise with spirit-infused force. The dead tree's false shell collapses under the impact, exposing the truth hidden inside. A dark, undead presence with red eyes reveals itself, no longer able to hide. Seeing the figure clearly, he greets him as if meeting someone long expected. He identifies the being by name and title, the magic fighter Kashiwagi Sarakui. The undead warrior is startled that a stranger knows who he is. The hunter explains that Sarakui is remembered as the hero who held the line against a northern monster wave 35 years ago, a sacrifice too great to forget. He recalls that even a memorial was raised so later generations would remember warriors like him. Sarakui's legacy survives in history as a rare combat mage whose name endured from the Great Calamity. Hearing that, Sarakui realizes his death at least carried meaning. But the hunter warns that history only preserves some names, implying others were erased. Sarakui senses the darker point behind those words and presses him to continue. The hunter asks whether he remembers Hakugo Naruhito, the vice guild master of the Arajiri Guild. That name brings back the memory of a catastrophic fire, and the chaos of that day. In the flashback, a field commander desperately calls for backup as the district burns. At the same time, civilians in the southern farming district are trapped as monsters close in. The commander keeps shouting Hakugo's name over the radio, begging for immediate support. Even while fighting to protect the people, his unit admits they cannot hold much longer. The answer that comes back is cold: no backup will be sent. The commander instantly understands that his squad has been abandoned on purpose. He accuses headquarters of lying about the south being safe so his team would be used as bait while the east gate force was withdrawn. The reply confirms it. Their sacrifice bought time for the main force to regroup and move through the north gate. Stunned, he asks whether they knowingly sent them to die despite the civilians still being there. Headquarters dismisses his outrage and tells him not to take it so hard. They justify the betrayal by saying history only celebrates those who stop the disaster and survive it. Their final message reduces everything to a brutal rule: survive and become a hero, or die and be forgotten, driving the commander into fury. That fury erupts into violence as the commander lashes out amid the flames, the memory revealing the betrayal that turned him into what he is now. A violent surge of power tears across the ground, turning the battlefield into chaos. The blast ignites the area, and the scene is swallowed by fire and destruction. Amid the inferno, an urgent command is given to evacuate the civilians before more lives are lost. Some hesitate in shock, but the danger leaves no room for argument. A harsher order cuts through their fear and forces them to move. Elsewhere, a shadowy spirit confronts the man who sent him to die, revealing that his sacrifice was stolen and another was celebrated as the hero. The spirit adds that even his existence was erased, leaving him without recognition or justice. The man presses that wound, arguing the dead hero cannot rest while someone else enjoys the glory that should have been his. The spirit's rage flares at the thought of returning for revenge. The man cuts off the outburst and steers the exchange toward a proposal. The spirit listens, still burning with resentment and suspicion. With quiet confidence, the man offers to help him claim revenge. He activates his power, preparing to bind the spirit to his will. He reveals he has already prepared a new vessel for the spirit's soul. The spirit pauses, weighing the offer instead of rejecting it outright. He admits he had not even imagined revenge was possible in his current state. Still, he warns that if he returns, the man may regret what he unleashes. He agrees only on one condition: he will not take part in harming innocents. The man realizes the spirit's core nature remains unchanged, even after everything that was done to him. He recognizes that stubborn morality as proof the spirit truly was a hero. He accepts the condition without resistance and promises to honor it. Satisfied, the spirit consents to become undead and enters the prepared body. The transfer begins as the spirit abandons its shadowy form and pours into the vessel. The system confirms that the man has obtained ownership of the earthbound spirit named Sora Kashiwagi. The reborn warrior emerges as a skeletal knight, and the man notes that even in death the spirit's potential remains extraordinary. Watching the new body take shape, an observing presence praises the result as a masterpiece. The man checks the undead status and sees that the spirit has retained exceptional combat aptitude. He learns that this undead can continue growing stronger as the soul develops and draws out more of the corpse's latent power. That discovery excites him, especially because the result exceeds what he expected from this creation. He confirms that the vessel also inherited the rare magic fighter trait, allowing martial and magical growth to reinforce each other. Turning from theory to practice, he asks the revived being how the body feels. The dragon-like undead answers that it is usable, though inferior to the body he had in life, and the man identifies the creation as an incomplete eldritch dragon. He concludes the form is incomplete because he only imitated the concept of such a dragon through a curse formula. Even so, he is pleased, deciding this is a far better starting point than his previous attempt. With the experiment deemed a success, he prepares to leave and expects the new servant to follow. The dragon bristles at being reduced to a mere minion. The man notices the resistance and pauses. When asked what is wrong, the dragon admits he dislikes being called a minion. The man offers to use his real name instead, but the dragon rejects that idea because he has already abandoned his old identity. The man is struck by how much more personality the once terse spirit now shows. Pressed to choose a new name, the dragon wants something intimidating but cannot settle on one. They toss around grand dragon names, but each suggestion is dismissed as unfitting, cliched, or excessive. Growing impatient, the man suggests Orochi, and the dragon immediately rejects it. The dragon fumes at the teasing and briefly considers lashing out. At last he settles on Fafnir, and the man accepts the choice. The man tells Fafnir to come along, already sounding drained after the ordeal. Fafnir suddenly stops him, embarrassed by a practical problem he has only just noticed. He realizes he is standing around completely exposed in his new body. Without ceremony, he grabs the man's coat to use it as makeshift clothing. Once covered, Fafnir relaxes, satisfied that this is at least a little more dignified. The dragon warrior confidently takes the lead, and Chinen follows as if this next step is already decided. Chinen is caught off guard by how naturally overbearing the dragon has always been. That night, something unexpected stirs inside the workshop. Shintani realizes the corpse soaking in solution is moving and erupts with excitement. Chinen explains that he found a soul from the boundary that matched the body, and Shintani is thrilled by the breakthrough and desperate to study it. The dragon is so unnerved by Shintani's obsession that he asks permission to hit him, but Chinen reminds him that the scientist is an ally. Chinen calls Shintani back to business. He informs the others that they will return to Tokyo for a while to sort out their belongings, and the group accepts the plan. Before leaving, Chinen activates necromantic power in his hand and turns his attention to the orc chief's corpse. The magic begins stripping flesh from the body with brutal efficiency. Chinen casually considers what kind of undead he should make from the orc chief. Shintani, unable to resist, asks what Chinen plans to create next. Chinen teases him for being curious. Shintani denies it at first, remembering how exhausting Chinen's previous experiments were. Even so, his curiosity wins, and he throws himself back into the work anyway. He admits to himself that Chinen keeps surpassing his expectations. Chinen decides on flesh separation, convinced there is no way anyone in Shintani's position could avoid being fascinated. The corpse is rapidly reduced until only the useful structure remains. The old spirit hovering nearby guesses Chinen is making an undead, and Chinen agrees that more fighting power is always useful. The system confirms the skeleton is being completed successfully, and that its base stats are doubled. Chinen asks Shintani for the extract needed to finish the creation. As the extract is applied, the system notes that its quality will shape the skeleton's final form. The result specializes the undead in defense. Chinen immediately decides this new undead will serve as his bodyguard. The skeleton begins to animate. It rises as a shield-bearing skeleton guard of decent grade. Chinen orders it to protect him whenever he uses life drain, making its role explicit. The obedient skeleton rattles in acknowledgement, and Chinen praises it like a satisfied owner. Shintani asks why Chinen chose a skeleton this time instead of another kind of undead. Chinen explains that bones are light, durable, and unlike zombies they do not rot on a timer, so with spiritual power he can maintain and control them as he likes, which suits a close-range skill like life drain. Shintani is impressed that Chinen planned not only the summon itself but also its long-term upkeep. With the experiment done, Chinen asks Shintani to watch the skeleton while he goes out on an errand. Shintani is baffled that Chinen wants to leave at such a late hour. Chinen reveals he has been summoned to the Pantheon because his level rose enough to qualify for a divine spell. That announcement leaves Shintani speechless. He finally blurts out his disbelief, struggling to process the idea of Chinen receiving a holy spell. The image of a praying skeleton makes him wonder if Chinen was secretly a priest all along. Chinen dryly claims he is actually a devout believer. Shintani rejects that outright, unable to reconcile Chinen's darkness with any kind of faith. Chinen changes the subject and asks whether the patent registration for the intermediate healing potion is finished. Shintani says the review should begin soon, and Chinen praises his speed while Shintani explains he hates giving rivals time to catch up. Shintani warns that the real issue is promotion, since the next exhibition is still far away. Chinen offers to take several potions and advertise them himself if an opportunity arises. Shintani gladly hands one over. Chinen sees the potion as the start of a fortune for both of them. His thoughts turn openly greedy as he reminds himself that money drives everything. That mercenary attitude only deepens Shintani's suspicion that Chinen being a priest makes no sense at all. Soon after, Chinen heads to the Pantheon, a mysterious tower that appeared after the Great Cataclysm. He learns that most visitors come there to receive divine spells and blessings from the constellations. The place feels less sacred than expected, more like a market where gods demand offerings from followers. As he approaches the main structure, Chinen notes that the relics for sale carry no real divine presence, and wonders why anything truly valuable would be left lying around. The climb quickly starts wearing on him. He curses the lack of elevators as he is forced to take the stairs. Looking up the endless tower, he jokes that perhaps the gods demand devotion through suffering, and learns the route is literally called the path to the gods with 108 steps. He complains that the setup is harsh, though not enough to fear divine punishment. Out of breath, he asks how much farther remains. When told the remaining climb equals everything he has already done, he realizes he is only halfway there. He swears that if this ordeal yields nothing worthwhile, someone will pay for it. Even so, he keeps climbing. At last he reaches the chamber beneath a dome of constellations and faces the heavens directly. He steadies himself and waits for the response. Several constellations immediately react with disgust, suspicion, and displeasure toward him. The old spirit finds the hostile reception hilarious, and Chinin tells him to shut up. Then a new presence steps forward, declaring that it will take its turn. A towering godlike figure reveals itself among the stars. With a touch, that being registers itself in the pantheon. The system identifies the new constellation as Giant of the Defiant Heavens. Chinin is granted 2 divine spells, Unholy Blessing and Wedge of Retribution. One spell strengthens Yin energy to raise a target's stats, while the other stores retaliation when he is hurt and unleashes it back on a single foe while temporarily boosting him. The giant proudly asks how Chinin likes the gift, and Chinin admits it is useful. The giant basks in that approval as proof of his own greatness. But the system immediately undercuts him by stating that this new constellation lacks the divinity expected of a true one. It further warns that without more achievements and praise, his starlight is too weak to attract followers. Chinin reads the message aloud and mocks the whole setup as a worthless system. Still, he concludes that whatever the pantheon thinks of him, he undeniably left stronger than he entered. Back in the city, he walks out into the night with renewed confidence. He is calm and satisfied after the trip. That mood breaks when someone calls out, surprised to see him coming from the pantheon. A large blond man introduces himself as Satake Shigeru and acts like they have history. Chinin does not recognize him at first. Satake reminds him that he used to look after him at the orphanage. Chinin remembers him only as the thug who extorted people there and makes it clear he wants no false familiarity. The memory of their past hostility resurfaces. In that flashback, Satake had cornered and threatened him for reporting his abuse. Young Chinin answered by smashing Satake before he could keep bullying him. Back in the present, Chinin taunts him by asking whether the nose he broke back then healed properly. Satake forces himself to calm down, but the insult clearly lands. He then shows off the emblem on his chest and asks if Chinin recognizes it. Satake reveals that he joined the Arajuri Guild. He sneers that if Chinin is visiting the pantheon, he must still be a low-level hunter, and warns him that things are no longer as they were. Chinin answers that from his perspective, nothing has changed at all. That reply enrages Satake. He starts to threaten Chinin physically. Before he can act, another hand stops him. Rago Jamin, a captain from Arajuri's 7th Attack Squad, intervenes and reminds Satake they are in the middle of the city. Satake tries to explain himself, but Jamin cuts him off. Instead of a street brawl, Jamin proposes they move somewhere proper and settle it in an official match. Jamin is intrigued that Chinin dared provoke Arajuri despite knowing who they were. He suggests Satake and Chinin already have enough bad blood to make the fight worthwhile. Satake laughs at the idea, still dismissing Chinin as a newcomer who only recently became a hunter. Chinin accepts the match without hesitation. Satake is briefly thrown off by how readily Chinin agrees. Chinin presses him, asking if he is the one who is actually afraid. Satake takes the bait and vows Chinin will regret those words. They relocate to Arajuri Guild's affiliated gymnasium. Inside the arena, the two sides take their places for the duel. Chinin announces that as a priest he will fight through a proxy, bringing out the dragon warrior. Satake mocks the summon at first, while his own gear quietly boosts his mana and overall stats. Chinin dismisses those bonuses as meaningless against what is about to happen. The arena system activates around them. It begins measuring the combatant's durability and health. A safety barrier is prepared to prevent death, and the match officially starts. Satake mistakes Chinin's silence for fear and taunts him mercilessly. Chinin stays expressionless, not even understanding why Satake is so confident. He reflects that running into Arajuri like this is convenient. The dragon squares up, eager to test the condition of his new body. Because the opponent belongs to Arajuri, he sees no reason to be gentle. Chinin reins him in slightly, asking him not to finish the fight in a single blow because he wants to test something. The dragon complains that restraining himself will be the difficult part. Satake charges him with a spear, determined to crush Chinin's side immediately. He commits fully to a plunging strike. The dragon slips aside and prepares a counter before the spear can connect. Using a trained reflexive movement, he reads the attack and turns the opening against Satake. He rotates behind the spearman and seizes control of the exchange. Then he follows with a precise point-breaking technique aimed at the weapon line and body. Jamin notes that the dragon's reactions are even sharper than in training, while Satake realizes too late that his attack was far too slow. The dragon's claw closes in before Satake can recover. He traps the spear and freezes Satake's momentum completely. Satake panics when his body refuses to respond the way he wants. The dragon coldly judges him as a fool who attacks without planning the next move. He adds that in a real fight, Satake would already be dead. The dragon almost regrets not going easier on him. Instead, he grabs Satek by the chest and drags him into range. A brutal strike detonates across Satek's face and sends him reeling. Satek is left stunned and terrified by the gap in power. Watching him crumple, Chinin recalls that Satek used to cry like a baby when his nose was broken. Now he only screams for a moment, which Chinin mockingly calls an improvement. Humiliated, Satek forces himself back up and lunges again in rage. The dragon calmly waits for him, with Chinin observing from behind. Satek throws himself into another reckless aerial attack with the spear. The dragon answers by crushing the incoming lion underfoot. The impact smashes Satek into the floor and shatters the arena beneath him. Even buried in the wreckage, Satek desperately clings to his weapon and tries to continue. The dragon warns him that repeating the same move only makes him easier to read. Satek stubbornly attacks again anyway, trying to force a hit through sheer aggression. The dragon punishes that mistake by breaking through Satek's leg with a devastating blow. The injury leaves Satek in total disbelief. The dragon raises his hand for the finishing strike and declares the match over. His killing blow starts to fall. Satek realizes in pure terror that he has no way out and believes he is finished. A brutal strike comes down, and the blonde captain desperately tries to stop it. Nearby, another man braces himself, tense and ready as the situation turns dangerous. The black-haired summoner notes that outside interference arrived faster than he expected. The duel is abruptly declared over, leaving the arena shattered and the blonde captain injured on the ground. Seeing the captain's broken leg, the brown-haired swordsman moves to fetch a priest for healing. The summoner stops him and claims there is already a priest present. The swordsman objects that basic healing magic cannot mend a fracture, making clear he knows the limits. He presses the summoner to explain how he intends to fix an injury like this. The summoner calmly reveals he will use a mid-tier potion instead. That shocks them, since such potions are normally worth a fortune, but he hints the market has changed. The wounded captain refuses to accept help from the man who beat him, even while complaining that no one told him about this new development. The summoner insists on helping anyway, already thinking of the captain as the perfect way to advertise the potion. He decides his luck is absurdly good for finding such an ideal test subject on the spot. He pours the potion directly onto the broken leg. The injury closes completely, and even the bone fuses back together, stunning the onlookers. Watching that miracle, the swordsman immediately decides he wants the potion for himself. The summoner notices that greed and interest have taken hold exactly as planned. The swordsman demands to know where a mass-produced mid-tier potion could possibly have come from. The summoner realizes he has the man hooked. He confirms the man is around 3-star rank as a captain in Aragiri, testing the value of the bait. Then he offers a deal: duel him, and he will reveal the potion's source. The swordsman sees no reason to refuse if the answer will come either way. The summoner asks for a real fight this time, dissatisfied with how quickly the previous match ended. The two sides take their places again in the ruined arena, with the Dragonian summoned standing beside its master. As the rematch begins, the swordsman launches in immediately with overwhelming speed. He opens with Zephyr swordsmanship, 5th style, sharp attack, driving a fierce thrust at the summon. The summoner is impressed that the Dragonian can react to such a fast opening strike. Even so, he judges that a heavy Dragonian body cannot keep up forever against that style. As the summon absorbs repeated hits, its defenses begin to erode under continuous damage. The swordsman keeps pressing from above, trying to overwhelm the summon before it can adapt. The summoner confirms the matchup is unfolding exactly as he predicted. He recognizes that Kashiwagi's speed-focused style is a natural counter to a Dragonian built for infighting, which is why he used the potion to provoke this duel. Rather than worry, he watches with quiet confidence. He reasons that if his summon cannot handle an enemy, Fafnir will suffer for it too, so this fight is also training for the summon's new body. A hidden patron praises that resolve, calling Fafnir his right hand. The summoner decides he cannot stay passive either, and casts Unholy Blessing on Fafnir. The spell strengthens undead allies while weakening the living, boosting Fafnir's overall stats. Kashiwagi is shaken that a holy-type spell can empower the summon this much. The summoner immediately turns the same power toward the enemy next. Unholy Blessing falls on Kashiwagi as a curse, making his body feel heavier. The system confirms all of Kashiwagi's stats have dropped, and the summoner recognizes the spell's dual nature as both buff and debuff. Faced with the summoner, the empowered Dragonian, and the unseen force behind them, Kashiwagi starts to doubt whether this is really the work of a mere 1-star. The hidden constellation asks the summoner how the newly granted power feels. The summoner dismisses the boast and tells the noisy patron to stay quiet until the fight is over. He moves on to the next part of his plan. He combines Wedge of Retribution with Unholy Blessing, turning Fafnir into a damage sponge that stores every hit for payback. Then he orders Fafnir to go wild. The hidden patron eagerly approves of that command. Fafnir charges into a barrage of attacks, deliberately collecting retribution with every blow it takes. Kashiwagi insists that as a 3-star captain he can adapt to a stat drop without trouble. But even while landing solid hits, he is rattled that a 1-star summon can tank everything and keep advancing. Fafnir abandons the speed-based habits of his former human life and embraces the undead body's ability to fight through damage. He decides to stop dodging, absorb the attacks, and force Kashiwagi into close combat. Fafnir closes the distance despite the incoming spear thrusts. With the buffs active, he drives forward like a monster built purely for pressure. He unleashes Connect Combat Arts, Chapter 7, 10-hit combo, battering Kashiwagi at close range. Kashiwagi is blasted backward by the sudden counteroffensive. Fafnir follows through with a crushing slam that sends him flying. Kashiwagi realizes the hit tore away more than half his health and concludes again that this cannot be a normal one-star summon. For the first time, he understands that one more clean hit could cost him the match. His pride flares, and he refuses to accept losing to someone he considers beneath him. He clings to his remaining speed advantage and decides the summoner himself must be the weak point. If he can slip past Fafnir and reach the master, he believes he can still win. The summoner sees the approach coming and remains unnervingly calm. Kashiwagi commits to Zephyr Sword style, Form 12, piercing attack, aiming straight for the summoner. The summoner does not even flinch as the strike closes in. He had already anticipated that Kashiwagi would target him directly. At the last instant, he releases the stored wedge of retribution. The accumulated damage erupts as a shockwave from Fafnir and smashes into Kashiwagi mid-attack. Kashiwagi's health drops to 0, and the system ends the match with the summoner's victory. Later, attention shifts to Aragiri Guild headquarters. Inside a high-ranking office, the guild leadership reviews what happened. The room belongs to the vice guild master. Hakugo Naruhito, Aragiri's number 2 and a 7-star hunter, demands confirmation that commercial mid-grade potions can truly be mass-produced. Kashiwagi, now bruised and humbled, confirms that the report is accurate. Hakugo asks whether their effectiveness has been properly verified. Kashiwagi reports that the potions instantly healed fractures and matched the quality of mid-grade drops from gates. That answer makes him realize how serious the discovery is. Kashiwagi apologizes for disgracing the vice guild master. Hakugo rejects that framing and asks why losing would stain Aragiri at all. Kashiwagi starts to answer in terms of rank and reputation, still trapped in old assumptions. Hakugo cuts him down, saying Aragiri's standing would not be harmed by the failure of a stagnant 3-star. Shaken, Kashiwagi admits he hid behind the guild's name and let arrogance carry him away. Hakugo ends the apology there and dismisses him. He orders Kashiwagi demoted from captain to regular member and commands an immediate investigation into the source of the potions. Then he turns his attention back to the duel footage itself. He states flatly that a true 1-star summon should never be able to defeat a 3-star. Since the summoner claimed to be a priest, Hakugo wonders if he somehow obtained a divine beast class summon. He orders Chinen investigated as well, suspecting there is more to him than he revealed. Elsewhere, Chinen expects the potion news to reach Aragiri's upper ranks soon and looks forward to their reaction. Fafnir interrupts him, wanting to discuss something else. He complains about being made to study a spearmanship skill book. Chinen explains that since Fafnir is a magic fighter skilled in close combat and weapons, he wants to learn from him directly. Fafnir grumbles but asks why spearmanship specifically matters now. Chinen's frustration over being targeted in future fights hardens into a decision to train seriously. He knows enemies will always go after the weakest-looking link, and that thought infuriates him. Fafnir mocks him for looking weaker than his own summon, and jokes that he should bulk up. That taunt hits a nerve. Fafnir suddenly feels his left hand moving on its own, as if the skill book is taking hold. A moment later he declares he has fully grasped the book's contents and is ready to teach spearmanship, praising Chinen's aptitude as a magic fighter. He tosses the book back and tells Chinen to memorize it too. Chinen catches it and prepares to claim the knowledge for himself. The book reveals itself as Verdian-style basic spearmanship, and Chinen realizes mastering it is the first step toward learning Death Spiral later. He recalls that Death Spiral was created by the British spear saint from this foundation and vows to complete it far earlier in this life than he once did. To him, this is one of the greatest advantages of being a regressor, and he intends to exploit it fully. When he uses the skill book, its outline installs directly into him. He instantly masters the 6 basic forms and marvels at how absurdly efficient skill books are. Fafnir proudly claims this proves he is an excellent teacher. Chinen is caught off guard by how fast the process really was. Fafnir warns that techniques are not truly learned until they are experienced through the body. To prove the point, he begins practical training with a violent opening strike. He asks if they should start for real, already attacking before Chinen can answer. Fafnir plants his spear and settles into a proper combat stance amid the wreckage. He acknowledges Chinen's dodge as decent, but makes clear that mere evasiveness is not enough. He explains that Chinen will never become comfortable with the spear if he only avoids attacks. Chinen argues that dodging is the normal response when someone suddenly tries to kill you. Fafnir denies any pettiness and insists this is purely instructional, even if it looks suspiciously personal. He says real combat training means facing killing intent without begging off just because the skill is new. Then he thrusts again and orders Chinen to continue. Chinen accepts the challenge and decides to meet it head-on. He activates the 3rd form, rotational defense, to block with the spear. This time he successfully intercepts the attack, earning Fafnir's approval. Chinen thinks he has blocked perfectly and prepares to counter. But the force of the clash still bites into his guard, showing the defense was incomplete. Fafnir drives through the exchange and punishes the opening in Chinen's stance. The impact catches Chinen off guard and breaks his momentum. He staggers back, winded and hurt by the follow-up. Fafnir reminds him that landing the first defense means nothing if he relaxes before the exchange is truly over. Chinin protests that he should have blocked it cleanly, and cannot understand why he still got hit. Fafnir explains that stopping the first strike is not enough if the second line of pressure is left undefended. When Chinin complains that the difference is just raw strength, Fafnir insists he already adjusted his power to match him. Chinin finally accepts the lesson and resolves to stop holding back in training. Life Drain activates, using absorbed energy to reinforce Chinin's physical body. With his body strengthened, he launches the fourth form, Hilt Strike, in a committed counterattack. His blow finally knocks Fafnir's spear aside and lands cleanly enough to shift the pace. Chinin assumes the exchange is over and starts thinking only about the counter, but Fafnir immediately calls that mindset wrong. Fafnir reveals he still has another attack ready. Chinin freezes for a beat, realizing he misread the flow again. Fafnir explains that Chinin focused on the second strike and never truly neutralized the first one. Chinin admits the criticism is correct, steadies himself under Life Drain's effects, and asks to try again. Fafnir comes at him once more, demanding that he get it right this time. Chinin meets the incoming spear with far more force and commitment than before. The two clash hard across the broken floor as Chinin finally starts matching the lesson in practice. Later, the scene shifts to a casual restaurant. Food cooks on the grill while the tension of the day gives way to recovery. A friend notices Chinin's battered face and asks what happened to him. Chinin sits there bruised and swollen, clearly having paid for his training. He answers only that a lot happened, leaving the details understated. His friend admits that lasting until the end against him without passing out is genuinely impressive. Fafnir cheerfully admits he may have enjoyed the training too much, and Chinin can only suspect his summon liked having a legal excuse to beat him up. While eating with his friend, Chinin decides he should have begun preparing much earlier if he wanted to act tonight. He weighs his options and realizes that although Life Drain can boost his body, relying on that alone would be too limited. As he thinks it through, he concludes he needs more than a simple enhancement to get stronger. He becomes convinced that with better stats and proper martial training, he can surpass the strength he had before the regression. His predatory confidence unsettles his friend, making it obvious Chinin is already plotting something dangerous. The mood briefly lightens when his friend celebrates a huge deposit and thanks Chinin for bringing him into a lucrative opportunity. Chinin immediately steers the conversation back to business by asking for any recent hunter news. His friend reports the major incidents people have been talking about around Hybera HunterNet. Among them are the Kamihara incident, the Kagoshima Gate, and a serial hunter murder case, all signs that serious trouble is accelerating. Chinin recalls those events from before the regression and realizes the timing is earlier than he expected. One report matters more than the rest. The Forgotten Temple Gate in Wakayama still has not been cleared. That catches Chinin off guard, because he remembers that place should already have been dealt with. His friend explains that Horizon Guild has been trying to clear it for almost a year and is now close to collapse from the strain. He further clarifies that it is a static gate, which normally remains stable as long as its monsters are periodically thinned out. But if mana density keeps rising, it can become a fluid gate and eventually rupture, spilling monsters into the real world. Hearing that it has reached that stage, Chinin recognizes the gate has become far more urgent. His friend confirms Horizon has locked the site down because the gate is now in a critical state. He also mentions that major guilds are gathering there, including the country's second-ranked Phoenix Guild and Daybreak, ranked third. That matters to Chinin because before the regression Phoenix obtained an epic-grade artifact, Dragon Scale Armor, from the Forgotten Temple. The moment he hears the gate is still uncleared, Chinin sees a chance to seize that prize for himself. He decides that if he can secure both the spear mastery he wants and the Dragon Scale Armor, the best possible outcome is within reach. Without hesitating, he orders his friend to gather the others and head for the site at dawn, making clear they are moving immediately. By the next day, the massive gate looms over the field, its scale confirming how serious the situation has become. The site information shows the Forgotten Temple is a fluid gate with a 1-star to 2-star entry range and mana density already at 93%. A large encampment has formed around it, showing just how many hunters have answered the crisis. Chinin notes that hunters from all over the country have gathered because of the restrictions and the gate's importance. When asked whether they should settle in like everyone else, he refuses, saying they will be inside the gate too quickly to need a tent. That confidence shocks the others, who know even Horizon has failed to clear it after months of effort. Chinin calmly promises he will finish the gate in 5 days. His boast draws immediate attention from nearby hunters, who call others over to witness it. One of the figures present is Asaka Mirai, Phoenix's rising saint and one of the elite competitors for the gate. Chinin recognizes her at once and remembers that she was the one who originally found the method to clear the gate and obtain Dragon Scale Armor. He also recalls her reputation before the regression as a genius whose career was cut short by a gate raid accident. As more notable hunters appear, his companion nervously points out yet another arrival. This time it is Gouda from Daybreak, another major contender entering the operation. Chinin remembers him as the future powerhouse known as Iron Fist, one of Japan's representative fighters. Seeing so many future stars gathered in one place, Chinin realizes the field is crowded with people who will shape the era. His friend worries they may not be able to clear the gate before those famous hunters do. Chinin dismisses the concern and insists they follow their own plan instead of measuring themselves against the celebrities. Privately, he narrows his focus to 2 goals alone: the Forgotten Temple and the dragon scale armor waiting inside it. Ignoring his companion's protests, he leads them straight toward the gate. The group enters the Forgotten Temple and finds themselves before the ruins of a vast, collapsed sanctuary. Once inside, Chinin activates his ring and calls something forth. A towering draconic-bound spirit materializes beside him, revealing that he can summon undead servants of overwhelming presence. The summoned spirit itself is startled that Chinin has managed to bind and subjugate boundary-class undead. That only makes his companions more uneasy, and one of them half-jokingly asks whether he plans to turn them into undead too. Chinin answers with deadpan menace that he would not waste effort turning just anyone into an undead. The spirit bluntly adds that the group is far too weak to make worthwhile zombies, deepening the awkward panic. Chinin starts to tell them to stop worrying over nothing and focus. Before he can finish, the ruined temple reacts around them, signaling that the real danger inside the gate is beginning to move. As the ruined temple shifts around them, the collapsing structure makes it clear the dungeon is still changing. The party hesitates at the unstable terrain, and the Lizardman Vanguard checks whether pressing on is safe. The woman explains that although the temple only requires level 2 to enter, its true difficulty is rated 5-star because the environment resets every day. That constant reset means the temple never stays fully mapped or predictable, forcing challengers to face a new layout each time. The black-haired leader realizes that because the structure itself changes, the temple's traits cannot be permanently analyzed either. He orders Fafnir to take point and reinforces him with necromantic buffs, turning him into the group's shield. Fafnir accepts the role and warns that he will prove his worth through action rather than promises. Inside the dim sanctuary, the group advances through cracked pillars and fallen stone toward a deeper chamber. Fafnir suddenly senses danger ahead and halts the party before they walk into it. A robed figure steps out from the shadows, its corrupted body marked by sinister energy. The enemy reveals itself as a fallen cultist, a once human priest twisted into an undead-like monster. The leader immediately identifies the threat, confirming they are dealing with fallen cultists. One cultist lunges first, trying to overwhelm the group before they can organize. Fafnir intercepts the charge head-on and stops it with brute force. One of the human companions panics and urges Fafnir not to fight alone because fallen cultists are known to be dangerous. Fafnir ignores the warning and seizes the attacker at close range, completely controlling the exchange. He drives the cultist down and pins it before it can recover. The cultist can only snarl helplessly as its assault fails. Fafnir follows through by crushing the enemy into the ground. He finishes the first cultist with a decisive blow to the head. The watching companion is stunned by how effortlessly the supposed elite enemy is being handled. Standing over the corpse, Fafnir dismisses the fight as trivial. The leader coolly reminds him not to destroy their heads next time, because intact corpses are more useful to his necromancy. Before the group can settle, more fallen cultists rush in from deeper within the temple. Fafnir notes that the enemies will keep swarming them if they stay on the defensive. Seeing the numbers increase, the leader decides to step in personally and raises his skull-topped staff. He activates Staff of Guides, reducing mana cost and preparing a necromantic control spell. Using bone control, he sends sharpened bone spikes through the charging cultists. The barrage tears through multiple enemies at once, breaking their advance. Dark energy seeps into the wounded cultists, exploiting their corruption from within. He recognizes their weakness. Fallen cultists have poor elemental resistance, so dark attribute attacks are especially lethal against them. The spell also slows the cultists' attack speed, leaving them even less able to pressure the party. Fafnir notices the slowdown immediately, and realizes the support magic is making his job much easier. With the buffs amplifying him, he surges forward and starts tearing through the weakened cultists at close range. He smashes through the remaining attackers in a rapid sweep, ending the skirmish before they can regroup. When the last bodies drop, the chamber falls quiet except for the aftermath of the slaughter. The leader casually admits he had briefly forgotten one of the cultists' key traits, their life-drain ability. Fafnir points out that if that ability had mattered, the leader would not have left the front line entirely to him, and he demands an explanation for the test. Now pleased with himself, Fafnir openly fishes for praise after carrying the fight. The leader suppresses his irritation and decides that enduring Fafnir's arrogance is still preferable to dealing with his former companion's constant regression. As the battle ends, the leader levels up and gains new necromantic knowledge. The rewards are 2 dark spells, Dark Wise and Dark Rain, both well suited to sustained necromancer combat. He immediately recognizes these skills as ideal preparation for the prolonged 5-day battle expected in the Forgotten Temple. Putting that insight to use, he calls the fallen cultists back to service instead of leaving them as corpses. The dead rise as armored zombies, and the system notes an unusually high completion rate for the conversion along with a major stat increase. The companion explains that fallen cultists retain much of their original strength after death, making them exceptional zombie material, and the leader values that even more than their life drain. The explanation goes over the companion's head, leaving him confused by the tactical distinction. The leader clarifies that the real point is not a dramatic jump in raw stats, but the practical usefulness of what these enemies become under his control. With stronger undead now added to their force, he orders the party to accelerate the exploration because the temple extends much deeper ahead. The group moves onward into the vast interior, entering the next layer of the shifting ruin. The battle inside the temple stays chaotic as the party keeps fending off monsters closing in from all sides. An armored fighter meets one attacker head-on, trying to hold the line in brutal close combat. At the same time, a powerful golden strike is unleashed across the hall to cut through the swarm. Even so, more spectral enemies keep surging forward, making it clear the group is being overwhelmed. The black-haired hunter realizes the problem is not strength but numbers, because the enemies do not seem to run out. As the temple itself begins to shake and shift, the danger stops being just the monsters. The knight urges an immediate retreat so they can reach the objective before the changing structure traps them. But the hunter stops him, struck by a memory that may explain how this place really works. He recalls an interview with Akari, the first person to clear the Forgotten Temple, and focuses on the method she revealed. In that account, the interviewer asks how the gate in the temple was opened. Akari explains that unlike ordinary gates, this one cannot be cleared just by defeating a boss. Instead, 3 kinds of monsters appear in the temple, and each defeated one drops 3 tokens. If 49 of those tokens are gathered and placed on a specific pillar, the path to the boss opens. Remembering this, the hunter understands that every monster in the temple exists to feed that mechanism. Before he can act on that realization, the hall trembles harder and a new threat begins to manifest. A huge red mass of energy forms overhead, signaling the arrival of something far more dangerous than the endless mobs. That energy tears open and starts taking shape in front of the party. What emerges is a floating eyeball monster, suspended by tendrils and radiating hostile power. The group immediately recognizes it as one of the temple's token-dropping monsters and braces for its attack. The eye gathers red energy into its pupil, preparing a concentrated blast. It fires a destructive beam straight down the hall at the party. The hunter stays calm, having already read the attack pattern. He summons a cluster of bone shields, confident they can intercept the beam. The red blast slams into the barrier instead of reaching the group. The impact is violent, but the shield formation holds together under the pressure. The reinforced bone plates endure because they are being actively controlled and maintained by magic. With one hand, the hunter keeps the shield wall stable and absorbs the attack's force. He explains that shaped bone under bone control is far tougher than normal, and the spellwork keeps the structure from collapsing. The eye immediately charges another shot, refusing to let up. A second beam lances out, aimed to break through by sheer persistence. Watching this, the pink-haired woman is startled by how quickly the situation is escalating. The hunter remains composed even as the beam bears down near him. His dragon-like summon steps in front of him and takes the attack instead. The creature orders its master to stay behind it, declaring that it will block everything. The eye keeps pouring its beam onto the summon, trying to burn through its defense. The blast spreads in a wide red torrent, but the summon continues to stand firm. Even under the sustained hit, the creature's footing barely gives. It realizes the attack is not even enough to scratch the scales of its current body. The hunter dryly notes that he put considerable effort into making that body durable enough to shrug off this level of damage. The summon agrees, now fully confident that the eye poses no real threat to it. As the eye starts to panic, the summon concludes that it has nothing to fear and can end this at will. It lunges forward in a sudden charge before the monster can react. With a crushing strike, it smashes the eyeball down and destroys it. As they approach the fallen creature, the summon asks whether this counts as turning it into an undead servant, but the hunter dismisses the idea because the body is too damaged to be useful. Instead, the hunter identifies the eye itself as the token needed to clear the gate, despite how unpleasant it looks. Before they can move on, another figure drops into the temple from above, interrupting the moment. The newcomer's face is hidden behind a cracked round mask with a disturbingly simple smile. It lands on all fours like a predator, revealing itself as a black, inhuman mimic wearing that mask. The others recoil at the sight, unsettled by the mask, while the hunter identifies this new enemy as a masked mimic. The mimic answers its arrival by releasing a sinister ability called Curse of Decay, signaling the start of a new and more dangerous phase of the fight. A dragon-like ally stands in the ruined hall as a dark curse begins eating away at his condition. He realizes something is wrong as the corrupting energy wraps around him and weakens him. The masked mimic's Curse of Decay is identified as the source of the debuff pressing down on him. The protagonist considers using Unholy Blessing, then connects curses to dark spiritual power and sees a possible counter. To test that idea, the dragon gathers dark energy into his hand instead of panicking. He confirms that a curse is just a dark attribute attack and successfully breaks the decay on his own with spiritual power. The protagonist recognizes that spiritual power of the undead is among the highest dark attributes, and should absorb most curses. He is impressed that the dragon grasped the principle instantly, proving far more talented than expected. The masked mimic lunges in again, driving a fresh wave of decay toward them. Rather than evade, the protagonist has the dragon hold position so he can test his theory directly against the attack. He activates Unholy Blessing, using his master's power to connect and mediate with the dragon's curse-laden body. The mimic is visibly shaken when the incoming curse fails to overwhelm its target. The protagonist explains that he is reversing the flow of the curse power the mimic planted, turning its own attack against it. The backlash tears through the mimic, confirming that dark spiritual attributes can be redirected and are especially effective against one another. Satisfied, he ends the experiment and seals the result with a decisive finishing strike. The mimic's body is shredded apart under the force of the counterattack. He steps over the fallen monster, fully in control of the exchange. From the remains, he retrieves the mimic's mask as a needed token. A spirit companion mocks his taste, but he reveals the mask was required to unlock the temple's hidden room. He recalls the rule: collecting 4 specific tokens from designated monsters and pillars opens access deeper inside. The final objective is the hidden chamber where the boss monster waits. He also remembers the catch that the tokens must not be destroyed while defeating their owners. His companion notes how troublesome that condition is, which explains why the temple remained uncleared for so long. Even without knowing who discovered the method, he decides to trust the information and keep moving. A nearby fighter reports that the Phoenix Guild is battling close by. He reacts with dry amusement, recognizing an opportunity or complication. The scene shifts to the Phoenix Guild, who are locked in combat with a swarm of temple monsters. Their swordswoman leader keeps her focus and prepares to cut through another attacker. She intercepts a leaping mimic cleanly before it can reach her. Her strike is precise and controlled, showing practiced skill rather than brute force. The protagonist's companion explains that this precision comes from a special sword effect that lets her cut exactly what she intends. Meanwhile, the protagonist's group advances through the temple at a faster pace, with the dragon now traveling openly beside them. The swordswoman notices the passing team and watches them with growing suspicion. Her companion points out how strange that party is, especially because they are openly using an undead summon. She dismisses it outwardly as reckless monster hunting, but the sight clearly unsettles her. Unbothered by their attention, the protagonist continues deeper into the temple. The swordswoman cannot accept that someone could be progressing faster than her guild while still pursuing a hidden objective. He senses her scrutiny but gives no sign of concern. When he glances back, she is struck by the unsettling feeling that she has seen him somewhere before. That vague familiarity grows stronger for her, though she still cannot place him. Elsewhere in the temple ruins, another group struggles among piles of monster corpses and collapsing stone. After days inside, they are exhausted and alarmed that the enemies keep appearing without end. They realize the spawning has become effectively infinite, even worse than near the temple boundary. One of them senses danger behind him and turns in panic. A horned cultist-type monster has appeared at close range, confirming the threat is escalating. The dragon ally charges in immediately to protect the group. He attacks with overwhelming physical force, driving straight through the enemy line. The impact blasts multiple cultist monsters apart, and breaks the encirclement in one move. As his spirit companion praises the dragon's courage, the protagonist reminds him that he is fighting for his own survival too. Without slowing down, the protagonist orders the others to move upward while he and his undead power carve a path through the remaining monsters. The young man finishes off a robed undead enemy by draining its life away as spectral servants gather behind him. His skill activates successfully, siphoning power from the fallen foe. The absorbed energy pushes him up to level 27, and he calmly accepts the gain. Pleased that one move served 2 purposes, he trades dry banter with his tiny floating companion about having more class. He dismisses the lecture, insisting that if anyone should talk about class, it should be the one he chose to keep around. Still mocking the idea, he crouches to collect what the enemy dropped while the companion hovers nearby. He places another token at the base of a cracked pillar, adding to the ritual setup around the ruins. The pillar responds, confirming that all 48 tokens have now been set in place. Realizing the dungeon's layout changes from floor to floor and can trap people inside, he decides they need to clear the gate while they still can. He tells the surviving hunters to take the magic stones and leave, then checks what Chinen plans to do. Chinen chooses to stay behind and keep leveling, and the man accepts the decision without argument. With the others withdrawing toward the exit, he remains at the temple with his summoned undead forces. As he steps deeper inside, the unstable floor and surroundings begin to shift underfoot. His lizard-like ally notices the layout changing again and worries they may not get out in time. He shuts down the panic and makes it clear they are not escaping yet. Instead, he declares that they are clearing this place now, revealing a more specific objective. He explains the condition. Tokens marked with the triangle, circle, and smiley pattern must be placed on matching pillars, which is why he had been hunting monsters and gathering tokens. Since the zombies cannot understand the symbols, he had to handle the placements himself while using them as support. Now that the setup is complete, he orders his undead to run ahead immediately. A sudden sense of danger hits him before he can finish the command. The entire chamber starts violently reconfiguring, with walls and debris grinding into new positions. One armored zombie is crushed in the upheaval, and the system registers its destruction. He breaks into a sprint as the dungeon's transformation accelerates far faster than before. Seeing the next safe section slipping away, he realizes they will be trapped if they do not reach it at once. The shifting architecture keeps sliding and sealing paths in front of him. He frantically searches for the final pillar's location, knowing everything depends on it. At last he spots it and surges forward, shouting that he has found the pillar. His relief lasts only a moment before he notices a new threat cutting him off. A massive stone section swings into place and blocks his route just as he approaches. He curses as the collapsing structure and flames leave him almost out of time. His lizard ally reacts instantly, ordering him to throw over the token instead of trying to reach the pillar himself. Trusting that call, he grips the bag and hurls the token with all his strength. The lizard warrior launches himself through the chaos to intercept and carry the throw the rest of the way. He catches the token midair and forces it onward despite the collapsing passage. The token lands in place on the marked pillar, completing the requirement at the last possible second. Even with the placement complete, the chamber continues shaking violently for a tense moment. The man, nearly overwhelmed, shouts in frustration as the room still refuses to settle. Then the upheaval finally culminates in one last explosive surge. Bracing for the worst, he can only wait to see whether they survive the mechanism. The completed pillar ignites with blue light, signaling that the ritual has truly activated. Blue energy lines spread across the chamber, linking the pillars and stabilizing the room. With the movement finally stopped, he exhales in relief after the close call. A magic circle opens a stairway downward, and his ally reports that a path to the underground has appeared, so he immediately decides they will proceed. They descend the newly revealed stairs into the hidden lower level. Reaching the bottom, he admits they had come dangerously close to dying. After surveying the chamber, he identifies it as a hidden room and warns that the real fight begins here. His lizard ally eagerly agrees and urges him to go bring down the boss. Together they approach a sealed set of grand doors deeper inside the ruin. The inscription above reveals the enemy waiting beyond, Masked Man Death Guardian. Faced with the boss room at last, they recognize the ominous presence behind the door and prepare themselves for what comes next. A young man reaches for a door, his ringed hand hesitating as he senses something wrong beyond it. He peers inside cautiously, already tense as if he expects danger waiting in the dark room. Before he can settle himself, a warped presence begins to manifest, distorting the space in front of him. A grotesque monster fully reveals itself, a mass of black tendrils, masks, and a single glaring eye. The dragon-like companion immediately judges the creature as vile, and the man quietly agrees. The monster answers by gathering purple energy at its eye, preparing a direct attack. It fires a destructive beam downward, forcing the pair to evade the sudden blast. The dragon steps in front and warns the creature not to target his master, drawing on dark aura to empower himself. With his body reinforced, he plants himself between the attack and the man, making clear the enemy will not touch his master. The monster escalates, opening a larger occult eye and activating a curse-like mental assault. The man is jolted by the intrusion as the attack strikes straight at his mind. Clutching his head, he realizes the enemy is trying to curse or mentally overwhelm him. The hallucination deepens into a swarm of red-eyed horrors pressing in on his senses. The vision twists further, trying to drown his perception in shapeless corruption. Seeing his master falter, the dragon turns in alarm and demands to know what is happening. He moves closer, trying to reach his master as the man remains momentarily trapped in the attack. The monster, confident in its advantage, declares that the humans are about to die. It calmly forms another sphere of destructive energy, ready to finish them off. From behind the dragon, the monster mocks them for enjoying themselves without including it. The man suddenly recovers, smiling as he reveals his mind has been completely protected by clear mind and unholy blessing. The nearest masked creature freezes as the failed mental attack is met by a holy counterforce. A system-like explanation confirms that unholy blessing grants resistance to Yin and mental interference, while especially empowering the masked dragonkin guardian. When the dragon asks what he did, the man explains he merely fed a little of his power into him. Now in control, he orders Fafnir to show the monster what he can do. The monster bristles in anger but keeps its charged orb ready. It launches the glowing sphere overhead and channels another beam attack toward the floor below. The beam spears down toward Fafnir, trying to pin him before he can close the distance. Fafnir narrows his eyes and reads the attack, preparing to break through it. He strengthens his legs with dark aura, turning defense into a burst of speed. With explosive force, Fafnir dashes straight through the danger zone toward the monster. His charge tears across the battlefield, cutting through the purple assault before it can stop him. The monster, suddenly pressured, tries to halt him and warns him not to run. Instead, Fafnir leaps in from above and closes the gap before the creature can reset its attack. He shifts his enhancement from movement to striking power, hardening his fist for impact. Fafnir slams a heavy punch into the monster's body, rupturing its surface. The creature staggers back with a pained shriek as the blow lands cleanly. Where Fafnir struck, the monster's flesh bubbles and deforms into unstable ectoplasmic lumps. Fafnir notices the strange reaction and laughs, sensing he has found a weakness. He studies the corruption spreading under the skin, realizing the damage is not healing normally. The man identifies it at once. The masked being's body is collapsing from the mix of ectoplasm and filthy residue. He confirms this is exactly what he expected and prepares to exploit it with unholy blessing. Empowered by that blessing, Fafnir's damaged body begins recovering even as his aura surges higher. The monster lashes out with a sweeping tendril blade, trying to keep Fafnir away. Fafnir meets the counterattack head-on and unleashes a practiced 10-hit combat combo. He drives forward with relentless, aura-coated punches, overwhelming the creature's defense. The barrage culminates in a crushing uppercut aimed straight at the monster's core. The final strike detonates through its body, blowing apart the point of impact. The monster reels in severe distortion, its form destabilizing under the sustained holy infused damage. Panicking, it realizes the curse should have worked and cannot understand why the man resisted it. Enraged and desperate, the monster abandons composure and screams that it will kill them both. Fafnir presses the attack, judging that his opponent's pain-based regeneration has slowed him enough to leave him vulnerable. The masked curse lashes out with a sweeping purple strike, forcing Fafnir to defend while the battle stays dangerous. Fafnir realizes something is wrong as he reads the enemy more carefully. He notices the creature's damaged leg is already restoring itself, confirming its recovery ability is active. That regeneration makes Fafnir question how they are supposed to finish the enemy decisively. Chinen answers by preparing bone control, confident they do not need to wear the monster down if they can end it in one blow. The curse senses the threat too late as Chinen's power closes in. Panicking, the creature unleashes Dark Wave and warns that taking the attack head-on will be fatal. Fafnir braces himself to absorb the incoming curse technique. At the same time, Chinen summons armored bone zombies to form a defensive wall around him. The purple wave crashes through the chamber, but Fafnir and Chinen's formation hold long enough to create an opening. One of the armored undead is blasted apart, showing the attack's force even as it is being spent. Using that moment, Chinen bursts forward in a straight charge toward the caster. He drives his hand into the curse's body and activates the ring sealing effect at point-blank range. The wedge of retribution locks the enemy's movements, freezing it in place for an instant. Chinen immediately calls for Fafnir to strike before the opening disappears. Fafnir launches himself high above the immobilized curse to deliver a finishing blow. He gathers all his force into a single punch, fully committed to ending the fight. Fafnir brings down his Ken combat arts technique, one-hit crush, in a decisive execution. The curse's head caves in under the impact, leaving no chance for recovery. With the boss defeated, Chinen and Fafnir stand over the corpse as the battle finally ends. Chinen receives a huge burst of experience, levels up, and treats the victory as only an opening act. When Fafnir asks about the real objective, Chinen points out that the altar behind the boss is what matters. They turn to the altar at the center of the ruined temple, where a red glow suggests a reward or key item. Fafnir immediately recognizes the prize as valuable armor, and Chinen agrees. The altar reveals dragon-scale armor, a transcendent grade set made from dragon bones that repairs itself and reshapes to its wearer's will. Seeing its quality, Chinen decides without hesitation to claim it. He tests the item by touching it and channels his power into the armor. Chinen realizes the equipment can be worn through direct contact alone. The armor begins flowing over his body as it responds to his will. As the transformation continues, Chinen sees that the item grants far better defensive bonuses than he expected. He understands that the armor can shape itself according to the image he holds in mind. It finishes forming into a sleek combat suit around him, trading some agility for a major rise in strike and magic resistance. Fafnir is pleased by the result because it means he no longer has to restrain himself during spear training. He admits he had been going easy on Chinen out of respect for a weak human lord, but the new armor changes that. Fafnir insists his harshness is loyalty, since making Chinen stronger is his real goal, though Chinen is not impressed by the enthusiasm. Chinen then gathers the remaining loot from the fight, including what dropped from the boss. As he does, something emerges from the masked man's corpse, drawing his attention. Chinen stops and demands to know what this new development is. A vision or system display shows the outside gate of the Forgotten Temple reopening beneath twin dragon statues. The dungeon announces that the boss has been subdued and the gate will close again in 3 minutes. Outside, waiting adventurers are stunned to hear that the Forgotten Temple has already been cleared and that the boss was suddenly defeated. People immediately speculate over which famous guild or top-ranked hunter could have done it. Chinen steps out safely, and an acquaintance rushes over in relief. When told the place has been cleared, Chinen casually reveals that he was the one who did it. His friend starts to explain that everyone is searching for the unknown clearer, not realizing Chinen is speaking literally. The meaning finally starts to sink in, leaving him baffled. Shock turns into frantic realization as he understands what Chinen is claiming. He begins blurting out that the person who cleared the Forgotten Temple was standing right in front of them. Chinen instantly clamps his mouth shut and orders him to keep quiet before the secret spreads. A guild member excitedly points out that clearing the Forgotten Temple should have made the protagonist famous, but he insists on keeping his role hidden and avoiding the attention. The others agree to add the boss reward to his payout, admitting they never even took part in the boss fight and would feel wrong profiting from it. He realizes they still have not asked what loot the boss dropped, which makes him think about the artifact he kept secret. The hidden prize is revealed to be a shadow mask, a cursed artifact that marks prey and lets its wearer track them over a long distance. He also recalls obtaining a final artifact, a mysterious book, and decides that one deserves a proper investigation later. When the guild member keeps pressing, he shuts the conversation down, making it clear no amount of persuasion will change his mind. His cold expression leaves no room for further argument. With his objective complete, he decides it is time to head back while the dragons remain under control behind him. Before he can leave, a martial artist from another guild confronts the group and demands to know who cleared the Forgotten Temple. A woman beside him explains that they want the answer for themselves rather than through rumor. The martial artist quickly rules out the Phoenix Guild, reasoning that they would have announced such an achievement immediately if it were theirs. He adds that his own group only just finished preparing, so someone else clearing it first makes no sense to him. The woman is left wondering who in the world could have beaten them to it if not the expected rival guild. She remembers the protagonist but keeps that suspicion to herself, deciding not to expose him. The scene shifts back to the workshop later that day. When the protagonist returns with his companions, they find the workshop in chaos, as if the place has been wrecked by a storm. The alchemist charges in furious and demands to know what he has done this time. The protagonist calmly asks whether Arajir showed up, implying the mess may not be his fault. The alchemist still blames him on instinct, though he admits he half expected trouble and had only tried to help with the advertising. He then explodes with pent-up frustration, saying the sudden success has put him through a nightmare. The advertising worked too well, flooding him with non-stop requests from every direction to buy potions and place bulk orders. He has been so overwhelmed that even answering a single call has become a crisis. Between the demand and the patent paperwork, he felt like he was being crushed and honestly thought he might die from the workload. The protagonist dryly asks whether all of that was really such a problem. The alchemist hurriedly backtracks, admitting the promotion was effective and crediting the protagonist, even if it nearly broke him. The protagonist dismisses the complaints, saying the results are what matters since everything worked out in the end. When he asks for a status report, the alchemist says the intermediate potion patent has been filed and mass production should begin soon. The alchemist also brings over the item the protagonist ordered, and the protagonist notes that rare orbs are difficult to track down. The item is a darkness orb, a tool that boosts magnetic force for black magicians and related classes. He tells Fafnir to stay put, prompting suspicion that he is about to try something reckless again. Ignoring the concern, he presses the orb against the dragonkin corpse and begins channeling power into it. The orb reacts violently as dark energy and blue currents spread through it. A shadowy draconic presence starts to emerge behind Fafnir, and even Fafnir is unsettled by what is forming. The protagonist explains that he is using the orb to raise the synchronization rate between Kangchi's soul and the dragonkin corpse. The attempt succeeds only partially, increasing the completion rate of the eldritch dragon by 7% while leaving it unfinished. Fafnir immediately asks why the fusion is still incomplete. A grim answer follows: if the orb breaks, the one bound through it dies. To test that warning, the protagonist tosses the orb away, forcing the unstable dragon body to lunge after it. After the creature catches it, he notes that its reaction speed improved with the higher synchronization rate, while Fafnir is horrified that he risked a death test. He explains that he needed to confirm the body would instinctively protect the orb, because otherwise the whole construct would be fatally flawed. Fafnir and the alchemist condemn him as a complete menace for treating life and death like an experiment. Unbothered, he turns to his guild companions and asks them to collect the magic stones from the corpse again, and they obey at once. He instructs them to extract the stones the usual way while keeping the body intact for further use. When asked if he plans to turn the corpses into undead too, he reveals a different goal. His next project is making a golem. That announcement shocks the others, who are already imagining something monstrous. He explains that his current level is not high enough to create high-ranking undead, so a golem is the more realistic next step, though he will need an alchemist and proper materials. The alchemist realizes with dread that he has effectively already been recruited for the job. The protagonist smiles to himself, deciding that all that remains now is gathering the necessary materials. The story then moves to Ground Zero, the former center of Saitama, where a great calamity turned a luxury district into ruins. At a battered building marked Bar Tenkawa, Fafnir asks if this is really the place, and the protagonist confirms that for now, it is. The young man enters a damaged bar with his reptilian companion, brushing off the creature's taste in old liquor because he has come for the manager. He identifies the target as Madame Shuri, a bar owner who secretly brokers black market deals. He notes that her operation has expanded quickly, but what matters is that she already possesses something he wants. The wrecked interior confirms the place has recently been hit by violence. Seeing signs of a fresh fight, he heads straight for a wounded survivor to get answers. The injured man tries to respond through pain as the stranger closes in. Without wasting time, the young man demands to know where the manager is. When the man resists and asks who they are, the stranger repeats the demand and pressures him to cooperate. The survivor breaks and reveals that Madame Shuri fled about 30 minutes earlier through the back alley, insisting that is all he knows. His companion warns that a half-hour lead would normally make pursuit difficult, but the young man is unconcerned. He activates Shadow Moxie and prepares to track her directly. A purple soul trail appears and stretches away from him, giving them a path to follow. The ability locks onto Madame Shuri's soul trace and confirms the chase. The trail leads out into the alley where the pursuit shifts from investigation to interception. Elsewhere, Shuri senses danger closing in and realizes she is being hunted. As she runs, armed men behind her shout for pursuit and refuse to let her escape. The symbol of the Red Spider Gang makes clear who is after her. Shuri curses herself for provoking a major syndicate and understands that mistake has now become deadly. Even without knowing the full reason, she knows being caught by them will ruin her. The gang closes in from the alley ahead, cutting off her route. She finds herself surrounded on all sides by armed pursuers. Cornered and exhausted, Shuri braces herself and searches for a way out. The gang tightens the circle, convinced her resistance is finished. Their apparent leader mocks her for making them work so hard just to pin her down. Instead of surrendering, Shuri suddenly draws a hidden blade. She warns them not to underestimate her, making clear she can still hurt anyone who comes too close. The leader laughs off the threat and points out that she no longer has enough support to back up her bravado. Shuri answers by inviting him to test whether her defiance is real. She takes a fighting stance as the gang hesitates, forced to respect that she may still be dangerous. Her confidence is strained, but she refuses to let them see fear take over. The leader notices a new arrival and realizes the crowd around Shuri has just grown. The young man steps into the alley and dryly treats the standoff like a performance. His sudden appearance unsettles both Shuri and the gang, shifting the balance of the confrontation. He remains calm and unreadable, acting as though he has already taken control of the scene. The gang leader tries to dismiss him as an outsider and orders him to stay out of their business. The newcomer ignores the warning, and his summoned reptilian beast appears behind him as a clear threat. The leader is rattled but tries to recover by insisting a summon alone is not enough to intimidate him. To prove his authority, he orders his men to attack immediately. The young man and his summon move at once, meeting the charge before the gang can gain momentum. The beast's first strike sends multiple attackers flying and breaks the gang's formation instantly. It follows through with another crushing blow, tearing up the alley as it advances. The assault continues with overwhelming physical force, leaving no room for a counterattack. Then the summon unleashes a concentrated energy blast that catches more gang members head-on. The beam smashes one attacker into the wall, and the leader realizes too late that this interference is far beyond what he expected. One surviving gangster responds by igniting both hands with fire, escalating the fight with a destructive ability. Shuri spots the sudden shift and shouts a warning. The fire user declares he will burn them to ashes and releases a massive wave of flames down the alley. The inferno surges forward, turning the narrow passage into a furnace and forcing everyone to react instantly. As smoke and embers spread, another gang member crouches nearby with a sly grin, looking ready to exploit the chaos. But the leader's expression hardens into alarm, suggesting the situation is already slipping beyond the gang's control. A beast-like fighter unleashes a dark aura, signaling that the confrontation is escalating beyond normal force. Watching the surge, a wounded man realizes his restraints or preparations have failed and panics at what has been released. The pressure of the moment turns chaotic as the violence peaks and someone nearby struggles to understand what is happening. The reptilian enforcer slams an opponent down with overwhelming power, ending the clash decisively. With the enemy beaten, he coldly reminds everyone that this is how the world works. Strength decides what is remembered. The protagonist arrives on the ruined scene, and the enforcer immediately treats him as someone important enough to ask whether their business here is finished. Attention shifts to the red-haired woman they protected, a poised figure whose injury hints at a recent attack and a larger grudge behind it. The protagonist quickly connects her to the earlier incident and suspects she is the woman whose face was burned before he regressed. Seeing her alive among the fallen attackers, he confirms that she survived this attempt on her life. Her condition reassures him that, at least for now, the attack failed to claim her. An older butler rushes in to apologize for arriving late, relieved that his employer is still standing. When he asks what happened, she can only say that the red spider struck suddenly and without warning. The protagonist listens closely, already treating the name of the attacker as useful information. The butler judges the protagonist to be unusually capable for a mere bodyguard, sensing he is more than he appears. He also questions the strange companions with him, and she admits she does not know who they are, only that they do not seem aligned with the attackers. The protagonist steps forward, thanks her for the drink he came for, and explains that when no one was around he followed her instead. Seeing her injured, he reaches toward her with calm confidence rather than aggression. He tells her to stay still, making it clear he intends to help. A healing spell spreads from his hand and envelopes her, shifting the encounter from suspicion to trust. Using life drain in reverse, he restores her health and proves he has rare support magic. She wonders if he is some kind of priest, and he sidesteps the question while confirming he is close enough to that role. Inside his head, his familiar boasts about the spell, while he dismisses the bragging and stays focused on the situation. With the immediate danger over, the story moves from the alley to the bar tied to her world. Back inside, she resumes control of the setting and opens a more deliberate conversation by asking what he wants to drink. He answers with milk on the rocks, signaling that he is unconcerned with fitting in or impressing anyone. She treats the order as absurd but indulges him, offering coffee if he wants to be taken seriously. Once she serves him, she gets to the real point and asks why he came to her. He answers by producing a special invitation and stating plainly that he wants access to the underground auction. That request catches her off guard, showing he knows about a hidden world not meant for ordinary customers. Instead of a ticket, she offers her business card as a safer pass that will identify him as under her protection. She explains that in Ground Zero, showing that card means no one outside the Red Spider will dare interfere with him. As the others settle in, she asks what exactly he hopes to find at the auction. He reveals he is after a mana engine rated at least 3 stars, a rare and valuable target. She warns that even the underground auction may not have something that exceptional, But now she understands he is chasing high-end goods. He reflects that he may need the item to stabilize a gate that could collapse, and the uncertainty only irritates him further. That thought pushes him to reconsider his options instead of relying on the auction alone. She offers another path, a formal request to protect Madame Shuri, with the reward listed as the very mana engine he needs. The job is really revenge, since Madame Shuri wants the red spider crushed after they targeted her, and she admits the auction itself might not solve his problem anyway. Reading the details, he recognizes that she is asking him to take direct action against one of Ground Zero's major powers. He points out the risk of making such an enemy, but she argues that if he wipes them out completely there will be no one left to retaliate. She sweetens the deal by stressing that he needs the mana engine and that eliminating the red spider benefits them both. He evaluates the reward, notes that a 4 to 5 star compressed mana engine would more than satisfy his needs, and decides the offer is worthwhile. She adds 10 kilograms of arachne thread as a bonus, making the contract even harder to refuse. He seals the agreement with a simple acceptance rather than ceremony. After a drink, he formally agrees to take the request. When she estimates he must be around 3-star strength or higher, he casually reveals that he is officially only 1 star. That answer leaves her momentarily unable to process how someone so capable could carry such a low rank. The next step takes him to the entrance of Ground Zero's Ant Cave Gate, where the hidden operation behind the auction is based. There he finds a heavily guarded portal already active, confirming that entry into this underground world is tightly controlled. As someone steps forward from concealment, the approach suggests the next move into the auction site is about to begin. A red-haired woman slips through the brush with a dagger, moving into position as if preparing a covert operation. She drives the blade into the ground and activates a spell, sending magical energy rippling outward from the point of contact. The spell spreads across the area in layered waves, establishing a wide-reaching field around the target zone. A portal opens as the technique, lunar sorcery, Butterfly's Dream, takes hold over the fenced compound. The field immediately shuts down all communication and movement skills inside its range, isolating everyone within. One guard reports that the west side is secure and tries to check on the east, unaware the trap has already cut them off. When no reply comes, he realizes too late that something is wrong just as a reptilian monster appears behind him. The ambush begins instantly, and the guard is cut down before he can properly warn headquarters. His body is thrown aside, confirming the perimeter has been silently breached. At the portal, the woman tells a young man that the anti-spider grunts were eliminated so quickly that going in alone now seems unnecessary. Even so, she gives him a final warning to stay careful once he enters. He answers with calm confidence, and steps through the gate into the ant cave. Inside, the cave opens into a broad underground passage as the system confirms his entry. He emerges from the portal with his reptilian summon beside him, advancing deeper without hesitation. He reaches for a ring, preparing another summon for the dungeon ahead. At his command, a skeletal warrior materializes from dark energy and takes shape in front of him. The newly formed skeleton guard stands ready as another piece of his fighting force. His reptilian companion wonders why he bothered bringing a weak skeleton into a place full of hunters and monsters. The summoner brushes off the concern, confident that the opposition will not matter. Their first enemy appears as a small red slime blocks the path. The creature is identified as a red slime, a 3-star threat whose corrosive mucus can melt iron from the outside. He finds it almost cute, while his companion warns that touching its surface is dangerous. When asked how to kill it, the explanation is simple. Its body stretches open when it attacks, exposing the core. The reptilian summon decides that makes the fight easy enough. The slime lashes out, extending its body in a sudden corrosive strike. As it opens wide, its vulnerable core is exposed exactly as described. The reptilian summon gathers power into his fist and times the counterattack. He punches straight through the opening and destroys the slime in one blow. As the remains splatter down, he boasts that there is nothing impressive about a monster whose weakness is so obvious. The summoner asks whether the cave's restrictions mean his own skills are unusable here. The reptilian summon smugly claims that, if so, he will be the star by carrying the fight through summon muscle alone. The summoner dismisses the bragging, unimpressed by the idea. He clarifies that even without a corpse, he can still use a monster's soul. From the slime's remains, a glowing red soul rises into the air. He calls the soul to him, beginning a different kind of summoning. He compresses the soul into a strange orb-like form, shaping it by hand. The process succeeds, and he generates a ghost from the slain slime. When challenged on its usefulness, he explains that this ghost inflicts debuffs and damage over time. He decides to demonstrate the tactic himself. More red slimes rush in, turning the cave into a swarm of bouncing corrosive bodies. He sends the skeleton forward while the ghost glides toward the incoming slimes. The ghost wraps around the red slimes and weakens them, reducing their strength and agility while inflicting exhaustion. Seeing the effect, the reptilian summon realizes this support ability is genuinely useful. The summoner tells him to hold the line until enough ghosts have been created, shifting the battle into a setup for mass control. Elsewhere in the cave, a group of suited men oversees a profitable bloodstone collection and notes that operations are proceeding smoothly. Their leader, Red Spider Kotetsu Yuzebe, warns his men not to repeat the earlier disaster caused by interruptions during a magic stone haul. When he asks about communications, he is told contact was lost a short while ago. Recognizing the danger, Kotetsu orders that anything unusual be killed on sight. At that moment, a skeleton steps into their area, shield raised, having reached them ahead of the others. Kotetsu turns and is stunned to find the intruder already standing before him, signaling that the infiltration has reached the heart of the operation. A skeleton warrior suddenly rises into view, revealing that the cave is spawning undead enemies. One of the suited men is thrown off by the absurdity of finding a skeleton here at all. Before they can process it, the group notices something even stranger approaching the battlefield. A horned lizard-like monster appears beside the skeleton, making it clear the enemies are not random but allied. The men respond immediately by ordering the skeleton burned down and unleashing coordinated fire magic. Their combined beams converge on the skeleton in an attempt to erase it before it can act. The skeleton endures the blast by raising its shield directly into the flames. Even under the barrage, the undead holds firm instead of being destroyed. As the attack continues, a heavier presence closes in from the side. The lizard monster charges through the chaos and joins the fight, turning the skirmish into a two-front assault. Watching from the shadows, the young summoner notes that his monsters fighting together has completely confused the enemy. One mage tries to regain control by hurling a concentrated fireball at the lizard. The blazing projectile races toward the beast while the summoner's side holds position. The skeleton counters with Bone Spear, sending a teal strike to intercept the spell. The two attacks collide, and the skeleton's defense neutralizes the explosion before it can reach the lizard. The enemy realizes with alarm that the skeleton can even block their magic head-on. The lizard praises its master's support, and prepares to exploit the opening. It powers itself up with Dark Aura, shifting from defense into close-quarters domination. Using a rapid martial combo, the lizard tears through the front line and batters multiple men in succession. When the rush ends, several attackers are already down at the monster's feet. From above the wrecked formation, the skeleton and lizard stand as a coordinated pair guarding their summoner. The summoner finally steps into view, calmly mocking the men for failing so badly. One survivor recognizes him as the outsider who had been with their madam and understands who is behind the monsters. The summoner reads their conclusion and knows they have figured out the monsters are his summons, which means they will now target him directly. Their leader quickly orders one man to pin down the lizard while the rest rush the summoner. The designated fighter charges the lizard with a shield, trying to hold it in place. The lizard meets the challenge head-on, unimpressed by the attempt. Its punch crashes into the shield with enough force to show the blocker cannot truly stop it. At the same time, another enemy casts Red Bind to restrain the lizard before it can break through. The binding takes hold, and the lizard is caught off guard as the shield bearer confirms the trap has worked. Unable to move, the lizard is effectively removed from the fight for the moment. Seeing the opening, the remaining men charge straight at the summoner. He stays calm and notes that they have chosen a new approach, but one he already expected. Dark energy spreads from him and reaches the attackers before they can close the distance. The effect settles over them like a curse, disrupting their bodies rather than striking them directly. The men suddenly feel themselves weaken, and a system like readout confirms their strength and agility have been reduced. With their stats lowered, the summoner prepares Bone Spear himself instead of relying only on his summons. One attacker tries to cut through the incoming spear, but the clash shows the weapon is sturdier than expected. A second fighter also intercepts it, proving these men are skilled enough to defend against a simple ranged attack. The summoner judges their level and concludes ordinary Bone Spear will not be enough to beat them. One of the weakened men breaks toward the skeleton, trying to eliminate the support summon first. He succeeds in smashing the skeleton apart, removing the undead guard from the field. After destroying it, he presses forward aggressively, convinced the battle is turning back in their favor. But the summoner immediately combines Bone Control with Bone Spear to forge a stronger weapon, a skeletal spear. He draws the newly formed spear into his hand as he moves to meet them himself. Switching to Verdian-style basic spearmanship, he commits to close combat. His first strike cuts through an attacker's defense in a single clean motion, proving his own martial skill is far beyond what they expected. The surviving enemies can only stare in shock as they realize the summoner is dangerous even without his monsters. With confidence, he presents the spear as the result of his training and prepares to finish the fight personally. One opponent clicks his tongue in frustration as he faces the summoner now standing as the true threat. A blonde fighter opens aggressively, mocking his opponent's close-quarters skill as he swings a spiked mace. The pink-haired man answers with a precise pommel strike, stopping the rush with a hard counter. Before the exchange settles, another combatant with a glowing blue weapon cuts in and disrupts the attack. The blonde man regains his footing, frustrated that his opening failed. His dark-haired opponent makes it clear he never considered the blonde man a real threat. Provoked, the blonde fighter charges again in anger, trying to force the fight back into his favor. The dark-haired man activates Bone Control, shifting the battle from simple weapon skill to supernatural power. The blue-haired ally reacts as the summoned force moves into position behind him. The blonde fighter desperately bats away incoming strikes, trying to keep from being overwhelmed. A brief opening appears, and he realizes too late that he has exposed himself. His opponent immediately capitalizes, bringing down a heavy smash while accusing him of dropping his guard. The blow lands cleanly and crushes through his defense. At the same time, another enemy reveals that dragon scale armor can change shape. That transformation catches the nearby fighter off guard, leaving him confused about what he is facing. The armored figure completes the shift into a far more monstrous, draconic form and meets the mace head-on. He catches the weapon barehanded, showing that brute force will not be enough against him. With a savage counter, the transformed warrior tears into his attacker and leaves him reeling. He calmly admits the ambush was intentional, revealing that the enemy was drawn here on purpose. Instead of finishing the explanation, he calls out for his ally to wrap things up on the other side. That ally appears in full dragon form, cloaked in dark aura, and notes that these opponents are tougher than expected. He refuses to give the enemy any time to recover and commits to ending it immediately. The dragon man slams down with crushing force, driving his target into the ground. The impact sends the victim skidding across the cavern floor while the remaining men hesitate in shock. Seeing their fear, the dragon man fixes on them as the next problem. One of the surviving men tries to rally the others with magic, insisting they stand and fight instead of running. The dragon man answers that resistance with a direct charge. He tears through the spell and batters the caster before the defense can hold. Buried in rubble, the caster bitterly realizes he has been beaten by what he sees as a mere lizard. The dragon man closes the distance before the man can recover. He drives a brutal kick into him, sending him airborne. The man crashes down hard, completely outmatched. Standing over him, the dragon man warns that arrogance means nothing when you are weak. With the cavern littered with defeated bodies, the dragon man checks in with his master as the dark-haired controller approaches. The master confirms he is fine and notes that this cave is unusual, since even a brief touch made his summoned skeletons rot away. Deciding the fallen enemy may still be useful, he activates a red summoning thread from his hand. The energy sinks into the defeated man's body and begins extracting something from him. Once the process is ready, the master calmly commands the hidden creature to come forth. The blue-haired ally arrives, reports that the troublesome one has been put in a coffin, and says the gate area is now clear. The dragon man opens the massive doors to whatever lies beyond the cavern. As they look ahead, someone wonders if the presence approaching is the boss. What emerges is a huge red slime, identified as a major enemy rather than a normal beast. The master and his dragon servant face it without panic, ready to assess the threat. The slime suddenly bursts apart, revealing that it was carrying something inside. Elsewhere outside near a blue portal, a red-haired woman and a man wait as the operation continues. The woman remarks that he really did finish everything on his own, more effectively than she expected. The dragon man explains that the boss was only a breeder, and its death caused the release they just witnessed. The woman casually notes that breeder bosses usually drop an item, and the expected reward appears. She then asks about the rest of the red spiders, and the answer is that they are likely tied to the nest and will move soon. That means there is no time to linger, especially since their target has probably already prepared an escape route. Confident she understands the enemy well, the red-haired woman urges them to move immediately and catch him. The story opens at a bar called Tianhe River, where a meeting is about to begin. Outside, a woman presents the promised reward to Chinin and his dragon-like companion, a machine waiting to be tested. She starts the demonstration by activating the system from her laptop. The engine roars to life as mana surges through its mechanisms. Seeing the output, Chinin immediately recognizes that the machine performs impressively. The device is identified as the MIS-4, a next-generation mana engine made by Meets Corp. The seller warns that if defects appear later, she will not take responsibility for them. She makes clear that this is only a prototype, so both sides are accepting the risk. Chinin realizes she had already planned to use him as the real-world test case if the engine malfunctioned. Even so, he decides the engine is good enough and asks her to deliver it to his site, which she readily agrees to do. That night, the scene shifts to a quiet building where Chinin returns safely. Inside the workshop, a blonde researcher rushes over in relief, thrilled that Chinin survived. Chinin brushes it off, but the researcher insists the place he went was so dangerous that his return feels unbelievable. The man jokes that Chinin coming back alive is so unlikely it would be easier to believe he had returned as a ghost. Chinin answers with a darker joke, saying he did not become a ghost but brought one back instead. A spectral serpent immediately appears behind him, proving he was not joking. The researcher is struck speechless with terror by the sight. Chinin dismisses his panic as excessive, while the researcher protests that a ghost suddenly appearing is exactly the kind of thing worth panicking over. As the ghost closes in, the researcher desperately begs for mercy and admits he has no way to handle a spirit right now. Unmoved by the chaos, Chinin declares he is exhausted and goes to sleep, leaving the others to deal with the aftermath. The terrified researcher flees and keeps screaming for the ghost to leave him alone. Back in his room, Chinin collapses onto the bed, unusually sleepy for reasons he does not understand. As he drifts off, his awareness begins to slip somewhere else. A system message explains that because his divinity as a constellation has risen, he can now enter the star sanctuary of the giant who defies heaven. He finds himself in a star-filled realm and realizes he has been transported somewhere unknown. There he is greeted by Kronos, who says Chinin has entered his domain. Chinin dryly notes that intruding into someone else's dream without permission is rude. Kronos clarifies that this is not a dream but the star sanctuary, a place he can now summon people to because his divinity has increased. He explains that the sanctuary is the private audience chamber of a constellation, separate from the broader pantheon. The system further clarifies that the pantheon is shared by all constellations, while each one also has an individual sanctuary linked to its own star. Chinin gets to the point and asks why Kronos called him here. Kronos admits he cannot offer blessings yet because he still lacks the necessary achievements, but he does have work for his contractor. The system reveals the condition for gaining divine protection. Chinin must raise Kronos' divinity by obtaining a holy relic, building a temple, or otherwise creating an unofficial achievement through worship. Since a holy relic is out of reach, Chinin quickly starts considering the temple option instead. He settles on that path, and the system confirms that constructing a temple will count as an unofficial achievement. Morning comes, and someone wakes the others up. The blonde researcher realizes the workshop has effectively become an inn and complains that nobody asked his permission. Chinin gathers the group and announces that he needs to discuss something important with them. The hunters assemble, sensing from his tone that this is more serious than usual. They joke nervously about the heavy atmosphere, and Chinin tells them to settle down. He begins by asking them the real reason they became hunters. The muscular man answers honestly that he did it to make money. Chinin approves of the answer because it is practical rather than self-righteous. The blonde man loudly agrees, arguing that if they wanted to be heroes, they would not be working under a money-driven boss like Chinin. With that honesty established, Chinin makes his offer. He wants them to form an official party with him. The proposal confuses them at first, since they thought they were already operating together. Chinin explains that until now he was only paying them for odd jobs, not treating them as true teammates. He asks them to stop working as hired hands and instead build something together as a real party. The muscular hunter immediately accepts the offer without hesitation. The blonde researcher agrees as well, as long as following Chinin does not get him killed. A young woman eagerly volunteers to join the expedition. The leader accepts immediately and tells her to get ready to leave. He announces that the group will spend a month at the boundary, and the others fall in behind him with military obedience. As they pack, the mood turns excited because this trip will let them finally call their hidden allies into the open. The Necromancer quietly reminds himself that he expects even more from them once they reach the boundary. At the boundary, the party enters a dark forest beyond the gate. While they advance, the dragon-like companion begins a quick briefing and warns them to save questions until the end. The Necromancer introduces himself as a saint who leveled up into a Necromancer, with the dragon-like being at his side. That impossible combination leaves the others stunned, struggling to process that he is both a saint and a Necromancer. The idea of necromancy becomes even more shocking when they picture the kind of undead he can command. Once the panic settles, they realize his power to summon the dead explains his unusual abilities, and they wonder if he is the first of such a class. He adds that as a saint acting as a god's proxy, he must build a temple, though for a necromancer that temple will take the form of a necropolis. He explains that a necropolis is effectively a city of the dead and the foundation of his necromantic stronghold. Because monsters and hunters constantly clash near the boundary, he decides there is no better place to establish that territory. Before anything else, he says they need defensible land on which to build. One teammate asks whether construction can begin as soon as they find a suitable location. He corrects him, saying a necropolis must be built on a spirit vein. Sensing something nearby, he orders Osabi to stay alert and watch their surroundings. A system notice reveals a spirit vein close by, giving them a direction to follow. The group pushes deeper through the brush in a tight column toward the source. Their dragon-like escort suddenly detects hostile presence ahead. The Necromancer confirms they are walking into enemies. A squad of armed lizardmen emerges to block the path. One of the party identifies them as lizardmen and warns that they are stronger and faster than orcs. The Necromancer dismisses them as little more than oversized lizards and moves to engage. As the lizardmen rush in, the dragon-like ally warns that their scales are tough enough to resist ordinary attacks. He casually asks whether blunt force would work better, treating the threat as manageable. His companion awkwardly backs off from the question, clearly unsettled by how calmly he is discussing killing them. The lizardmen charge straight at the dragon-like fighter. He meets them head-on and tears through the first attackers with overwhelming physical force. His expression hardens as he commits fully to the slaughter. In moments, he batters aside the rest of the front line. With bodies dropping around them, the Necromancer and his dragon-like ally advance as if the skirmish were trivial. The Necromancer activates Raised Undead Flesh Wyvern, beginning to turn the battlefield into a source of reinforcements. A new armored zombie is generated from the fallen lizardmen. He notes that monsters gather where spirit veins run strongly, confirming they are close to what he needs. Without slowing down, he orders the party to stay sharp and keep moving. Behind them, the dragon-like ally continues smashing apart any lizardmen that try to surround the group. The Necromancer now walks with a line of undead lizardmen under his control, turning the enemy's numbers into his own. The others begin hauling monster materials while keeping pace, adapting to his method of war. When they reach a river valley, he identifies the area as a promising site for the camp. He explains that the local monsters are stronger because this is a convergence point of spirit veins, which makes it ideal for the necropolis. He assigns the others to prepare camp, despite their concern that too many enemies remain nearby. With quiet confidence, he tells them that numbers are meaningless against the Necromancer. To prove it, he begins another spell and calls them to watch closely. He unleashes bone control, sending necromantic power through the battlefield. Then he simply turns away, certain the spell will finish the fight for him. The controlled bones whip through the charging lizard men and cut them down in a sweeping massacre. By sunset, the battle is over and the forest falls quiet. The party stands on a field of dead lizard men, with the necromancer's dominance over the boundary now undeniable. He begins shaping the necropolis by using flesh writing to split bone from flesh. Bones and remains tear-free and gather as raw material for the structure he is creating. He follows that by exerting bone control, forcing the scattered remains into formation. As his companion realizes he is building a necropolis, he confirms he is making an obelisk to serve as this place's symbol. The companion questions the choice, noting that an obelisk is traditionally a monument to the sun god Ra. He agrees, framing the obelisk as a symbol of life and of the sun god's authority. He then twists that meaning, declaring he will create a black obelisk as a deathly inversion of that perfect symbol. His companion praises the idea as a fitting expression of necromancy, and he accepts the approval. With the concept settled, he starts the actual construction, and the mass of bone rises violently upward. System warnings report that the souls tied to the spiritual power are reacting. The necropolis is taking shape, and a huge amount of spiritual power is being consumed. The growing tower tightens and hardens as the structure nears completion. Straining under the cost, he pushes himself to finish with just a little more effort. The system reports that continuous consumption has reached half his spiritual power and is still accelerating. As the black obelisk draws more power from the spirit vein, he keeps feeding it despite the mounting drain. He gives the final command for the necropolis to manifest fully. A massive dark fortress rises from the completed obelisk, transforming the site into a towering temple of death. The system declares the black obelisk complete, credits him with an extraordinary feat, and notes a major boost to completion performance. The new structure floods the area with blind fog that cripples normal sight, leaving his companions disoriented and unable to see. At the same time, the undead are strengthened, and Fafnir immediately feels the surge of power. Half blinded but thrilled, he celebrates that he actually pulled it off. His triumph collapses into pain as the spiritual burden lashes back at him. The system reveals the cause at once. Continuous consumption has nearly emptied him, and his spiritual power is depleted. Seeing him fail, Fafnir and the armored man rush forward in alarm. The scene abruptly shifts away from the battlefield. He wakes inside a tent with a pounding head, recovering from the collapse. His floating companion is delighted that he truly managed to build a temple, though she warns him to keep his voice down inside the tent. He steps out while she jokes about the irony of making a death temple from an obelisk, a symbol of life. Outside, they look upon the completed fortress as she explains that his feat has deepened the bond between him and the giant who defies heaven. His companions gather and check whether his body has recovered. He downplays his condition, insisting he only overextended himself despite looking pale. The armored man accepts that for the moment, but asks when the fog around the necropolis will clear. He explains that the fog is a permanent feature of the necropolis, creating a problem for anyone nearby. To solve that, he activates another function with a gesture. The system registers his companions to the black obelisk, making them immune to the blind fog of the dead realm. Their sight returns immediately, and the group reacts with relief and admiration. He watches their reaction with quiet satisfaction. The system expands his necromancy range and undead capacity, and he realizes the necropolis can now shelter his people from danger. Another notice confirms that the constellation giant who defies heaven has grown in divinity, restoring more of Kronos' power. With the fortress secured, he turns the group's attention to strengthening their combat ability next. He tells them it is now their turn to become stronger, leaving them confused by the sudden declaration. He reminds them that if they are going to keep fighting together, they all need to improve. He assigns Fafnir to train Yuma first, putting the dragon in charge of the armored man's development. Fafnir eagerly accepts and promises harsh instruction, while Yuma realizes he is about to suffer for it. He then turns his attention to Yuka and the others as the next trainees. With a darkly confident smile, he promises to train them personally. Fafnir begins Yuma's lesson by asking what his innate trait is. Yuma explains that he mainly specializes in defense, and that his shield produces a recoil effect whenever he blocks. Using martial god eye and martial arts analysis, Fafnir immediately judges that Yuma has misunderstood his own ability. When Yuma repeats the term repulsion in confusion, the system identifies his trait as one that channels magic into the shield to increase defense and impact force. Fafnir clarifies that the true nature of the trait is repulsion, a force that pushes interacting objects away from each other, and asks to examine the shield himself. A reptilian warrior narrows his focus as he prepares to teach a combat technique. He explains that a shield can be used offensively by returning an incoming strike as a shockwave. To demonstrate, he channels dark aura into the shield instead of treating it as mere protection. The magic gathers at the shield's edge as if it were becoming a weapon. With one empowered swing, he blasts apart the nearby tree and proves the shield can strike back with force. The young trainee is stunned that a shield could be used that way at all. The instructor clarifies that the trick is to infuse the shield as though he intends to cut with it. He hands the shield over and pushes the trainee to attempt the same method himself. Left to try alone, the trainee steels himself in front of another tree. He begins concentrating and carefully feeds magic into the shield. His first attempt produces a visible arc of power as he swings, but he pours in too much energy and loses control of the output. The overloaded strike detonates violently, knocking the instructor back and smashing the tree apart. Rather than praising the result, the instructor points out that the trainee used excessive magic and needs only enough to avoid recoil. He concludes that the rest is simply repetition until the motion becomes reliable. The scene shifts as the black-haired leader begins evaluating the others and asks them to state their traits and skills. The archer explains that her main attack uses a crossbow and that her key trait is resonance, which links magic into an object to strengthen it. A floating companion notes that the ability sounds useful, though the leader remains measured. He judges resonance to be difficult at first but highly capable once properly mastered. To help her improve, he offers her a skill book to use immediately. She hesitates because the item seems too valuable to accept casually. He dismisses the concern, has her use the telekinesis skill book, and effectively installs the skill for her. He then instructs her to apply resonance to the crossbow and move it with telekinesis. She starts by resonating magic through the weapon. Then she layers telekinesis on top, lifting the crossbow into the air under her control. She immediately senses that this combination works differently from her previous use of resonance, and he confirms the new skill is stacking over the old one. He tells her to keep aiming with the crossbow while firing it through telekinesis. Following his guidance, she holds the weapon aloft and prepares a remote shot. As she concentrates, she realizes the combined technique is responding with far more force than expected. That sudden increase catches her off guard mid-control. The empowered bolt launches with a violent surge of purple energy. It slams into the target with destructive impact, far beyond an ordinary shot. Her companion is thrilled by the result, calling the display extraordinary. She is impressed too, but immediately questions why the attack power rose so sharply. The leader explains that she effectively amplified the attack twice, once through resonance and again through telekinesis, creating a compounded effect. He reflects that before the regression, no one had pushed the interaction between those two abilities that far. She accepts the explanation, and he tells her to keep practicing until her magic runs dry while also rotating to another weapon. With her training set, he turns to Hybera and asks what ability he has. Hybera awkwardly warns that his trait is not very impressive. He demonstrates by opening a blue spatial portal from his hand. His innate trait creates an inventory space, but he admits it can only hold about 1 kilogram. The floating companion jokes that he sounds like a baggage carrier, while the leader immediately sees hidden potential instead. He recalls that one of the strongest future users of spatial ability stored all of his weapons inside such an inventory. That fighter used the space to draw whatever weapon he needed in the middle of battle. The leader identifies the real weakness as the heavy mana cost required to maintain the inventory. He decides to personally rebuild Hybera's fundamentals from scratch, and Hybera agrees without hesitation. 2 weeks later, the training gives way to a real battlefield under a dark sky. A pack of armored boars with glowing red eyes charges straight toward the defenders. The former trainee now stands at the front line with his shield glowing, bracing to stop the assault while skeletal soldiers hold position behind him. He meets the impact with a new technique called Moving Fortress, turning his shield into a mobile bulwark as the boars crash into him. A boar-like armored monster lunges at the group, but its charge is stopped by a shield at the front line. As more of the beasts close in from multiple sides, the defenders realize they are being surrounded. The party braces in a tightening ring while the monsters press closer, threatening to overwhelm them. The caster channels magic into her crossbow, and the weapon resonates with her power to amplify the next shot. The empowered bolts strike the charging boar monster and pierce through its advance. The creature dies violently, its body breaking apart as its soul begins to tear free. The others watch as dark energy rises from the corpse and is drawn away instead of simply dispersing. That soul is absorbed by the necropolis, confirming that this place functions not just as a battlefield but as a temple-like territory that feeds on the dead. The tower responds to the absorbed soul, glowing ominously as the territory itself grows more active. Seeing the aftermath, the group reflects that they defeated the armored boar without even needing Fafnir to intervene. Chinin points out that because this place has become his territory, the victory's benefits are flowing directly back to him, and he levels up to 50. A system notice declares that he has broken past his previous limits and entered a new realm. Blue energy surges around him as he reaches 2-star status, but the system warns that the amount of experience needed from now on has doubled. Chinin immediately starts thinking ahead, deciding that stronger summons like a golem may now be within reach instead of relying on skeletons or zombies. With that in mind, he announces that he is heading to Shintani's workshop and leaves Fafnir behind to watch over the necropolis. Fafnir grumbles at being turned into a guard, but Chinin brushes it off and tells him to keep the territory safe while the others look to him for direction. Before leaving, Chinin checks the team's levels to judge what they can handle next. The shield bearer reports that he is level 48. The female caster follows with level 47. The blonde teammate admits he is only level 45. Based on that gap, Chinin assigns them a new destination, Furujuku. He reveals that the ancient garden there contains a hidden area they can access. He explains the entry condition. If they bring a goblin shaman's heart and blood to the underground grounds, they can open the hidden zone, which requires at least medium mana resonance. Inside that area, they must defeat a Dragonian to prove themselves worthy. The team is startled by the idea of facing a Dragonian, realizing this is far beyond an ordinary errand. Chinin confirms it, and makes clear this is a test they must clear without leaning on stronger allies. He warns that they will survive even if they fail, but the pain will be severe, while success will bring a worthwhile reward. The three exchange uneasy looks, weighing the danger against the opportunity. After a moment, each of them steels their resolve. Together they accept the mission and promise to clear it as best they can. As the shield-bearer prepares to depart, he remembers to address Chinin properly before leaving. He asks whether Chinin really wants to handle the large stock of mana stones alone, since sorting them all overnight would be a burden. Chinin says not to worry, because he already has someone else in mind for the job. Elsewhere, a red-haired woman at a bar receives Chinin's message and sees that he wants mana stones processed. The text makes his request blunt and direct. He needs her to sort some mana stones for him. She lowers the phone with a tired look, already regretting that he thought of her for this kind of work. She complains to herself that her bar has somehow turned into a mana stone processing site. Meanwhile, Chinin heads to Shintani's workshop. Inside, Shintani is in the middle of dangerous potion work, surrounded by flames and unstable reactions. Chinin's sudden voice startles him, making it clear he had been too absorbed in his work to notice anyone enter. Shintani flails in panic and blurts out nonsense as he scrambles to recover his composure. He forces himself to calm down and regain control of the experiment. Chinin calls out how absurd that reaction was, especially from someone who had not even noticed a visitor. Shintani, embarrassed and shaken, protests that Chinin scared him by appearing without warning. Ignoring the outburst, Chinin asks whether the mass production of intermediate potions is proceeding smoothly. Shintani says the work is mostly fine, but his tone suggests there is still a problem weighing on him. When Chinin casually drops the formalities and speaks more familiarly, Shintani is caught off guard by how close that sounds. He quickly says he does not mind and tells Chinin to speak however he wants. Chinin steps in closer, shifting the conversation from small talk to something more urgent. He tells Shintani to stop what he is doing and come with him, leaving Shintani confused about what Chinin wants next. The black-haired man abruptly reveals that he intends to create a golem. The blonde researcher is caught off guard, barely processing what he just heard. He quickly realizes the claim is serious and understands that the man means a true mana-powered golem. Knowing even major corporations have only reached the basics of golem research, he chases after him in disbelief, while the man calmly says he can do it if the researcher handles the technical labor. The offer instantly wins him over, and he eagerly commits himself to the project. Their plan begins with recovering the masked man's corpse from the Ring of Darkness, giving them the raw material for the experiment. The researcher questions why they would not simply turn such a huge body into an undead, which would seem more efficient. He also points out that ordinary golems are usually made from stone or metal, making this approach even stranger. The black-haired man explains that he is not making either one alone, but a hybrid undead golem he calls a blood golem. They begin construction by engraving the necessary patterns into the corpse. The researcher channels mana into the dead giant's exposed heart area and starts carving the internal pathways. He carefully forms the mana circuit that will let the construct function. As the glowing lines spread through the giant body, the foundation of the golem takes shape. The researcher finishes the exhausting first phase and takes a breath. He recognizes that this circuit work is the most delicate and essential part of creating a golem. Once the engraving is complete, he asks what must be done next. The black-haired man has already prepared the rest of the body, assembling mechanical components beside the giant remains. He produces the core of the MIS-4, explaining that it can generate mana on its own. He reveals the key idea. If that core is embedded in the masked man's heart, its mana should flow through the circuit and restart the dead heart. He declares that this core will serve as the golem's new heart and sends it into the body. With precise control, he orders the core to link itself to the corpse. Mana threads lash out from the core as it forces a connection with the giant body. The core drives itself into the heart cavity and begins integrating with the flesh. The researcher fears the circuit is being destroyed, but the black-haired man tells him to look more carefully. What seemed like damage is actually the mana sinking inward and permeating the body from within. The researcher realizes this means the MIS-4's mana has completed the golem's foundation, and he is thrilled by the breakthrough. Satisfied, the black-haired man moves on to the final adjustment, shaping the creature's outward form. The result is a completed blood golem, a massive red construct born from the giant corpse and empowered by blood-based force. To test whether it possesses awareness, the black-haired man addresses it directly. The blood golem responds immediately, and recognizes him as its master. Its awakening is crude and intense, but it proves the creation is alive enough to obey. The researcher celebrates, realizing they have achieved a level of success far beyond previous golem attempts. At the same time, a contractor spirit appears to remind the black-haired man of a promised reward. He tells the spirit he is heading to the Pantheon, signaling that he intends to collect it now. The spirit impatiently urges him to leave at once and stop lingering over the new golem. He arrives at the Pantheon, a grand divine hall beneath a celestial dome. There he is met by a giant god who immediately senses his purpose. The god admits surprise that he has accomplished so much in so little time. Because the giant deity's divinity has risen thanks to him, The god grants him a new power as a reward. Golden divine energy descends and settles into the black-haired man. The pantheon announces that he has received a holy spell, and the giant god proudly demands that he appreciate it. The god boasts that this gift reflects the scale of his own power and status. The black-haired man checks the reward and is immediately confused by what he sees. The granted spell is Power of the Giant, a holy spell that drains a target's life force to restore or increase physical strength. He bluntly questions why he was given such a dubious ability, noting that as a necromancer he relies on undead rather than direct physical combat. When he tries using it on an undead, the spell fails because undead have no life force for it to affect. He concludes that the spell is designed for living humans, and does not suit his fighting style at all. In his view, the reward is effectively useless to him. He accuses the giant god of choosing a spell that matches the god's own nature instead of his needs, making it irrelevant to a necromancer. Put on the spot, the giant god can only protest defensively when his selfish choice is exposed. Chinin dismisses his current limitation, saying the real issue is not inability but that he has never had a chance to use his power properly. An irritable spirit overhears him and mocks him as an incompetent constellation, provoking Chinin from above. When the spirit repeats the insult, Chinin snaps in frustration at being belittled so directly. The scene shifts to the city, where Chinin is back in ordinary life and moving through the streets. He senses an interruption and pauses, realizing someone is trying to reach him. The call turns out to be from Madame, a contact important enough for him to answer immediately. Chinin picks up and asks what she wants, calm but attentive. Madame tells him she has found a lucrative job completely outside the Red Spider issue, making it sound like a major opportunity. She keeps his attention by stressing that this is not a trivial errand but a serious chance worth taking. The target is the Sighton Company, which is offering over 100 million for someone with true healing ability, and she asks if he wants the job. Sighton is introduced as a giant corporation with enormous influence in both mana stone operations and scientific research. The reason for the request is their chairman's youngest daughter, who has been struck by mummy disease. Every conventional treatment has already failed, leaving the family desperate enough to seek extraordinary help. That desperation eventually brings the request to Chinin. At the chairman's residence, the group confirms that success would mean obtaining the humanoid ginseng they came for. The humanoid ginseng is revealed to be an extremely refined dark mana elixir of the highest grade, valuable enough to justify the risk. Madame checks whether Chinin can truly handle a case worthy of that prize, and he answers with complete confidence. The disease itself is explained as a condition in which mana invades and hardens the body from the inside, gradually turning the victim into a mummy. Chinin cuts through the mystery at once, deciding that once the actual cause is identified, the cure should be straightforward. Meanwhile, Shintani is overwhelmed less by the mission than by the luxury of the chairman's home. Madame turns to him and confirms his identity, making formal introductions as the meeting begins. Caught off guard by her attention, Shintani hurriedly confirms who he is. Madame flatters him as a leading potion expert, and even an alchemist, and the praise leaves him flustered but pleased. Chinin notices how easily Shintani brightens under praise and quietly finds it amusing. His attention then shifts, sensing a more serious presence entering the room. A magic circle on a gloved hand hints that the newcomer is no ordinary businessman, but someone with real magical power. The man is revealed as Fumiki Hoshino, chairman of Sighton Company. Shintani immediately feels crushed by the chairman's presence, and realizes the man's power is overwhelming. He recalls hearing that Hoshino is one of the 7 company heads and a 7-star magician, and seeing him in person confirms the rumors. Hoshino greets Madame like an old acquaintance, making it clear they have history. Madame responds politely, acknowledging his status while keeping the exchange controlled. Hoshino asks not to be addressed so formally by his title and suggests they leave personal matters aside for now. He turns to the 2 young men and asks whether they are the ones taking on his daughter's case. Chinin introduces himself first, and Shintani quickly follows, trying to keep up. Hoshino admits he has heard countless promises from people who claimed they could save his daughter. His bitterness shows as he says every one of them turned out to be empty talk. Chinin answers with blunt confidence, implying that unlike the others, he is actually capable. Desperate and exhausted, Hoshino asks plainly whether Chinin is truly saying he can end his daughter's suffering. Chinin refuses to offer proof in words alone, and tells him he will simply have to trust him. With no better option left, Hoshino suppresses his doubt and entrusts the matter to Chinin. Chinin reads the decision for what it is, a father cornered enough to gamble on anything. Hoshino's thoughts confirm it, as he admits he has no other choice if there is even a chance his daughter can be saved. Chinin accepts the task with easy confidence, while Shintani privately panics at how casually he is treating a life-or-death case. Shintani quietly begs for reassurance, afraid they may be walking into disaster. The sick room is opened, and the real test begins. Inside, Chinin sees multiple recovery-oriented magic systems already set up around the patient. He immediately apologizes for the bluntness and asks why so many magic circles are being used at all. Hoshino is taken aback, and Chinin begins explaining that mummy disease is driven by mana overstimulating and contracting the muscles. He points out that restorative circles may look appropriate, but they only keep stimulating the underlying cause instead of removing it. Hoshino is forced to confront the implication that all the treatment methods he relied on have been useless for his daughter. A surge of blue mana gathers as a healing ritual is prepared. In a hospital room, a gravely ill woman lies in bed while her father receives the arrival of the people meant to save her. Barely conscious, Sarah recognizes her father and reaches for reassurance. He comforts her at once, and she weakly asks who the strangers are. The black-haired man is introduced as part of the team that can cure her, and she is urged to endure a little longer. With the family's consent secured, he decides to begin immediately. He orders Renya to prepare the transmutation circle and mana stones for the treatment. Renya moves into position and starts setting the ritual components in place. A crystal mana stone is laid down as the core of the procedure. Renya channels mana into the floor to activate the setup. The mana stone responds, flaring with power. A system-like analysis confirms that Renya is using alchemy to seize control of the room's mana through a transmutation circle. He lowers the ambient mana concentration so the poison lodged in Sarah's body can be drawn out. Renya reports that he has cleared the room's mana, creating the conditions for extraction. The black-haired healer explains that this is the crucial moment to pull the poison from her body, a feat only he can manage. Sarah remains still as the treatment reaches its decisive phase. Her father notices slight improvement, while the healer understands that removing the poison is only the first battle. A spirit named Kronos appears and warns that even if the poison is expelled, Sarah has already suffered severe muscle damage. The healer answers that he has another skill capable of restoring physical strength, though he is struck by finding a giant-related power in this place. He begins the second stage by invoking the power of the giant. Sarah's body reacts violently as the new force enters her. A status readout shows her life force dropping while her physical strength rises sharply, alarming her father. Renya fears the treatment may have failed. Instead, Sarah convulses and cries out as the process overwhelms her. She suddenly vomits dark blood, expelling the poison in a brutal purge. Her father panics, but the healer keeps control of the room. He warns that touching her now would ruin the treatment beyond recovery. He explains that he used a spell stronger than usual to save her, and any interruption would only worsen the backlash. He realizes the giant's power converts life force into raw strength, but he can compensate for the loss with his own vitality. To do that, he drinks life force potions and prepares to transfer the surplus into Sarah. He places his hand over her and channels the recovered life force into her body. The transfer continues directly into her bloodstream, though he notes it would have been easier if the poison had been removed earlier. Even so, he insists on pushing through with a treatment no one else could perform and urges her to hold on. Wrapped in surging mana, he sustains the impossible procedure until the restoration takes hold. Her father can only watch in stunned silence as the crisis passes. Sarah's eye opens, signaling that she has returned to consciousness. She softly calls for her father, confirming that she is truly back. Overcome with relief, he embraces her and breaks down in tears. Later, he bows deeply to the healer in sincere gratitude for saving his daughter. The healer downplays the praise, saying Sarah survived because she endured the ordeal, and advises that she be fed well to rebuild her strength. Still shaken, her father admits he cannot properly express his thanks. The healer brushes it off as simply fulfilling the request, though he remains awkward around such heartfelt gratitude. He then casually asks to receive his promised reward. The father immediately opens a case he had prepared for payment. Inside is a unique grade elixir ingredient, a humanoid ginseng of exceptional rarity and quality. The healer accepts the reward with satisfaction and thanks him. Before leaving, he asks one more thing. The father wonders whether this treatment method could be used on other patients, but already suspects how difficult that would be. The healer confirms he cannot personally go around curing everyone one by one, and the father concedes the point. So the healer proposes a larger solution. Site and company should build a treatment facility instead. A playful spirit praises the contractor, while he brushes off the fuss and keeps the situation moving. He confidently explains that if he can understand the artifact's principles, mass production should be possible, and he can at least promise that much. When his client hesitates, he reassures him and leaves the detailed development and improvements to the company. The suited man is caught off guard by how smoothly and boldly the proposal is being handled. After a tense pause, he accepts the arrangement. To seal the deal, the contractor demands a 10% royalty if development succeeds, treating the invention as immensely valuable. The scale of that demand shocks the other side, who sees it as a fortune. The contractor insists the price simply matches the artifact's worth, and the agreement is finalized with a handshake. Satisfied, he leaves with the contract from Eaton Company secured. He returns to his bleak stronghold after concluding the business. Back home, he casually calls out to ask whether anything went wrong while he was away. His dragon servant greets him respectfully, and he jokes that he expected complaints about how long he had been gone. Instead, he offers the dragon a reward, presenting an expensive elixir. The dragon erupts with joy, overwhelmed by the unexpected gift. The contractor immediately grows suspicious of that exaggerated gratitude. He tests the dragon's stomach and realizes something is off. He bluntly demands an explanation for the dragon's swollen belly. The dragon freezes, knowing he has been caught. Embarrassed, he admits he got hungry after fighting monsters and ate some mana stones. The contractor is stunned that the dragon treated valuable mana stones like snacks, even if only a little. As the dragon panics and offers to go hunt more immediately, the contractor stops him before he can run off. He physically restrains the dragon to keep him from making the situation worse. Then he unexpectedly praises the dragon for his work instead of punishing him. Using his ability, he checks the dragon's condition and senses that the overeating has changed him. The status confirms that Fafnir's mana capacity and accumulation have increased, and that some growth conditions have been met. He learns that Fafnir possesses an unfinished dragon heart with no mana inside it. From that, he concludes the dragon is instinctively trying to fill the missing heart by consuming mana stones. So he tells Fafnir to keep the remaining stones for now, since they are enough to sustain that process. He explains that spending money on the dragon's growth is worthwhile, because stronger servants will benefit him more in the long run. He openly states that Fafnir becoming stronger is far better for him than hoarding the earnings. Moved by that trust, Fafnir lunges in to hug him with crushing affection. The embrace immediately becomes dangerous, and the contractor struggles to breathe. Fafnir quickly lets go and awkwardly apologizes after nearly choking him. Recovering, the contractor remembers Osabi and asks where the noisy spirit has gone. He summons the mischievous ghost over at once. He then calls the spirit to him as well and begins channeling necromantic power. Bones and remains rise under his control as he starts assembling something from the dead. The gathered corpse is revealed to be Osabi's buried body, which he had intended to use from the beginning. Ignoring the spirit's alarm, he forces the soul into place and tells it to watch. He declares this to be his own version of fusion and completes the ritual. The system confirms that the dead body and soul have fused, granting him a new spell called fusion. At that moment, an adventuring party returns from the ancient proving grounds and proudly announces their safe success to Chinin. He dryly acknowledges their work while wondering why they are striking such dramatic poses. One of the adventurers notices the figure standing nearby and hesitantly asks who it is. The contractor turns the question back on them, implying they should already recognize him. The fused undead suddenly revives as a skeletal mage, cackling that he has been resurrected yet again. Osabi immediately launches into manic talk of chaos, destruction, and ruin. The contractor shuts him down at once, reasserting control before the rant can continue. He introduces the result plainly. Osabi is now a skeleton mage, an undead of 2-star grade. The adventurers recoil at the implication that he may start turning people into skeletons too, but he cuts off the chatter and moves on. At the ominous tower, the leader calls everyone to attention and sets the next move in motion. With calm confidence, he announces that they are heading south. One of the rookies realizes that means advancing straight toward Ground Zero and voices his alarm. The leader confirms it without hesitation, making clear the danger is intentional. He reveals the purpose of the march. They are going to expand their territory. He reflects that before the regression, he had been alone. Back then, he could only manage one undead army by himself, leaving him badly outnumbered. He remembers lacking the manpower to keep the Rodnov family and the 7 great houses under control on his own. That limitation is why he is now broadening his forces. He sees strong necromantic allies and capable draconic warriors as essential, and treats this single necropolis as only the start of something much larger. He adds that he also intends to raise his contractor into a supreme constellation, framing the campaign as growth for both his faction and his partner. As they move through the wilds, the group presses deeper into hostile territory. Their dragon ally warns that trolls are waiting ahead. When asked about avoiding them, the dragon explains that the trolls' keen sense of smell and their numbers make slipping past nearly impossible. A rookie recalls that trolls are dangerous monsters usually found in 4-star gates, and the threat immediately feels beyond their level. The leader notes that trolls are especially troublesome because of their extreme regeneration. The dragon asks what he plans to do against enemies like that. Ignoring any thought of retreat, he decides they are already too deep in and must break through. He confidently declares that if the trolls stand in their way, they will smash through them head-on. A troll closes in, turning the confrontation into an immediate battle. Driven by hunger, the troll charges with brute force and no restraint. The leader summons his blood golem for its first real combat test. He orders the creature to prove its worth, and it launches itself at the troll. The blood golem attacks aggressively, meeting the troll before it can overwhelm the group. The troll catches the golem's strike and tries to overpower it through raw strength. For a moment, the clash turns into a close-range struggle as the troll attempts to tear the golem apart. The troll lands a heavy blow, showing that sheer physical power alone is enough to damage the golem's body. Part of the blood golem is blasted away, but the loss does not stop it. The troll celebrates too early, convinced it has beaten the strange opponent. The leader immediately commands the blood golem to stop holding back and go all out. The golem's spilled blood surges and begins flowing back into its body instead of being lost. Its true nature is revealed. Unlike a normal flesh body, it is made from blood infused with mana. Because the mana engine inside it remains intact, it can reconstruct itself from scattered blood, which is exactly why the leader built it this way. The dragon worries that such regeneration could drag the fight out indefinitely. The leader corrects him, explaining that this is not just a durable tank but a weapon designed to evolve in battle. The blood golem transforms its body into a blade, turning regeneration into an offensive advantage. It rushes the troll again and drives the transformed weapon straight into its target. The troll is cut open before it can properly defend itself. Its blood spills onto the ground, creating exactly the opening the golem needs. The blood golem absorbs the spilled blood, increasing its own volume and power. As the stolen blood fuels it, the creature swells into a far more imposing form. The system confirms the result. The blood golem has advanced from 3-star to 4-star in the middle of the fight. With one troll already down, the group sees that the experiment has succeeded and the balance of power has shifted in their favor. The remaining trolls erupt in fury over their fallen kin and charge in for revenge. Rather than being rattled, the leader coolly marks the next phase of the battle. The dragon eagerly claims the troll in the middle as his prey, pleased to finally join the fight. The leader assigns one of the remaining trolls to the blood golem, trusting it to handle the enemy alone. He decides that he and the rookies will bring down the last troll themselves. Turning to the inexperienced hunters, he presses them to prove they can do it. The rookies answer with resolve, accepting the order and preparing to fight. The black-haired hunter tells the others to stay back while he takes the lead. A hulking bald monster lunges forward with brute force, charging straight at the party. One of the men realizes too late how fast the creature is closing in. Before the blow can land, a movement skill shifts the target out of danger and disrupts the attack. A female archer calmly draws on purple power and prepares a counterattack. Using telekinesis, she sends multiple bolts down from above to pin the monster in place. The creature roars through the barrage, still trying to break free. The bolts tear into its body and stop its momentum with a brutal hit. The archer refuses to let the monster escape now that it has been caught. Even wounded, the creature bolts away from the group in a desperate retreat. The black-haired hunter notes that it is still getting away. A white-haired ally opens a spatial portal to cut off its path. The fleeing monster runs straight into the trap without realizing it. It is violently redirected and smashed into the ground by the spatial skill. Seeing the opening, the skeleton mage is ordered to finish it. The undead caster gathers a fireball with immediate lethal intent. The blazing spell drops toward the trapped monster before it can recover. The explosion engulfs the area and obliterates the target. When the smoke clears, the party stands unharmed while the enemy is reduced to wreckage. One companion is stunned that a mere 2-star skeleton mage produced that much power, and the black-haired hunter explains it came from perfect coordination between body and soul. He reflects that a soul formed from blue and red energy becomes a singular being only when those forces meet under the right conditions. Satisfied, he credits the result to his contractor performing exactly as expected. He then notices the fighting elsewhere has also ended. Nearby, his dragon-like summon stands over another fallen enemy and asks if it can claim the mana stone as a reward. He gives permission, and the summon eagerly accepts. The dragon swallows the red mana stone whole. Its dragon heart immediately begins converting the stone into mana, increasing both magical reserves and physical ability. The hunter recalls that this summon once had to shatter stronger bones just to survive, making the current enemy seem trivial by comparison. He realizes the creature can keep growing simply by consuming mana stones. Testing that idea, he tosses it another stone. He tells the summon to devour everything available, and it obeys. As the mana takes hold, the dragon's body starts changing under the strain of rapid growth. A surge of power bursts outward, kicking up a violent shockwave around them. Its muscles swell as the transformation continues. The growth spreads across its whole frame, turning the summon visibly stronger and denser. The dragon completes a dramatic power-up and revels in the increase. A system notice confirms that Fafnir's dragon heart has reached its mana limit and advanced by one stage. Now upgraded to 4-star strength, the dragon boasts that it can take on all comers. The hunter stares at the overexcited result with flat disbelief. Even he has to wonder whether the summon was more manageable before this regression. His attention shifts to a larger objective as he activates the 5th Necropolis installation. With that final site secured, he acknowledges that the network is finally complete. He places a hand down to initiate the connection between the necropolises. The 5 towers link through a shared space, expanding his maximum summon capacity, boosting undead stats, and giving him communication across the connected territory. When asked if he plans to build even more of those ominous towers, he decides this network is enough for now. He explains that creating more would only spread his forces too thin to defend them properly. He understands the risk clearly. Once multiple necropolises form a single territory, destroying even one would cripple the entire system. Remembering the past, he recalls that before the regression the Romanov family destroyed the Black Beast and disabled the Necropolis network. He hardens his resolve and vows that this time he will not allow that disaster to happen again. With the objective complete and the danger past, the group happily decides to head home at last. A black-haired man wraps up the job by unexpectedly granting 2 weeks off. The young hunter is thrilled by the sudden break and can hardly believe it. The others are too stunned to object, realizing refusal is pointless. As the team parts ways, they agree to reunite at the Saitama workshop after the break. When the dragon-like companion protests being left out, the black-haired man calmly includes him in a separate errand. He tells the creature there is somewhere important they need to go together. That destination turns out to be Bar Milky Way. The young hunter enters the bar, returning to a place that is already expecting him. The red-haired bartender greets him like a familiar guest. She teasingly suggests his eagerness might mean he has grown attached to her. He brushes that off with dry humor, reminding her he is still human. The blonde bartender joins them, and the young hunter settles in as if resuming unfinished business from last time. Instead of alcohol, he has served his usual milk on the rocks. When she questions why he ignores appearances, he makes clear he dislikes alcohol and came to discuss business, not flirt. That answer makes her reassess him more seriously. She senses there is more behind his visit than casual talk. Intrigued, she invites him to get to the point. He notices signs that Bar Milky Way is under pressure and correctly guesses she is not the one truly in control here. He offers to solve her problem himself. When she doubts him, he makes clear he came with a real proposal, not a joke. She finally asks what he is after. He answers that he wants the vacant seat of Red Spider. He lays out Ground Zero's balance of power, where Red Spider, Bar Milky Way, and the black market merchants keep each other in check. His offer is simple and ruthless. If she helps him erase Red Spider, he will become the faction's new king. She hesitates, knowing Red Spider's executives are elite fighters and doubting he can really bring them down alone. He argues that Red Spider is already weakened after losing key forces in the Ant Cave, making this the best moment to strike. He assures her he can back her takeover of Red Spider's territory, as long as she accepts him as the new ruler of the faction. In return, he wants Bar Milky Way to leave Ground Zero's internal faction war to him and focus on making money. Satisfied by the terms, she agrees to the deal. He immediately asks whether the human hunters in Hokuto Prefecture are still abusing non-humans as usual. She confirms that they still treat them as less than people. He decides the timing is ideal and reveals the next step: gather the non-human runners the hunters are pursuing and direct them into Ground Zero to hit Red Spider. His strategy is to let the hunters and Red Spider exhaust each other first, then wipe out whoever remains. He intends to destroy both sides in a single stroke. Elsewhere, the story shifts to Ground Zero itself. Attention settles on a high-rise that serves as a major stronghold. Inside, a battered subordinate rushes in with urgent news for his boss. His panicked entrance leaves blood and broken debris in its wake. He apologizes as he addresses the chairman. The chairman, Ryo Kamishiro, coolly demands to know what is happening. The subordinate reports that human hunters from Hokuto Prefecture are gathering in Ground Zero. He adds that they seem to be planning to kill Red Spider's executives and seize the Black Herb Farm. That report makes the chairman react violently. The subordinate further admits their recent failures at Bar Milky Way and in the Ant Cave. Ryo concludes that those defeats have made their enemies think Red Spider is vulnerable. He orders security at the Black Herb Farm tripled at once. When the subordinate protests that doing so would weaken protection around the chairman, Ryo explodes at his lack of priorities. He reminds him that black herbs are a uniquely cultivated drug and the foundation of their organization's power. To Ryo, the Black Herb operation matters far more than the Ant Cave ever did. The subordinate hastily accepts the order while Ryo remains seated, already calculating the coming conflict. Sho is singled out and forced to attention, while the red-haired man in the room remains bowed under the weight of the moment. A monstrous presence immediately claims responsibility for the next move, deciding to take the initiative and personally handle the human hunters. The target is identified as Red Spider number 2, Sho Join, and his resolve becomes clear. He intends to wipe out the flies swarming around his farm himself.